Good evening and welcome to the September 6th, 2023 Litchfield School Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, review and revision of the agenda. Is there any items?
So there's one item marked in red as an update, and then I made one other adjustment to language under policy, which we'll talk about tonight.
Okay. The only other thing that's on my radar screen is that I understand that capital improvement is meeting tomorrow.
Yes.
And that there may potentially be one other thing that needs to be added to, or is being suggested to be added to the capital improvement plan. So should I add that to old business since
That would be great if we could.
We've talked about it a bunch of times?
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna add discussion of the capital improvement plan to old business.
And I'd also like to add just a conversation under business and operations under the financial update for the DOE 25, MS 25 that was sent.
Yep.
Thank you.
And for the consent agenda committee reports, does any board member wish to move any of these report updates to the old business section, or are the updates, the written updates complete enough that we're good to move forward with just written updates?
I'm going to provide an update on the civil engineering under old business from the facilities committee.
Okay. And I think that's actually already on the agenda under.
It is.
Yeah, okay, so that's already there.
Yeah.
Any other committee reports to be moved to old business?
I owe you the update on the economic development report.
Okay.
I did not do that.
Okay. You can add the written update, or you can
Yeah, I can talk about it for a few minutes.
give a verbal, okay. All right, moving on to summary of non-public actions from the August 16th, 2023 meeting. Ms. Harrison made a motion to approve both August 2nd, 2023 non-public session minutes. Mr. Cutter seconded the motion. The motion passed 4-0-1. Heidi Ames abstained. Ms. Harrison made a motion to nominate Jackie Heaton as CHS special education teacher. Ms. Ames seconded the motion. The motion passed 5-0-0. Ms. Harrison made a motion to authorize an additional deposit of $5,000 for the purchase of the Riley land, conditioned on a formal agreement with Miss Riley's legal counsel that the board waits for the March 2024 vote to approve the purchase of the land. Ms. Ames seconded the motion, and the motion passed 4-1-0 with Mr. Polanski voting no. We don't have a student rep yet with us tonight, so I'm going to skip over that, and we'll move into presentations and recognitions. It is time for the bi-monthly report from Ms. Widman and Ms. Fowler. So I don't know if you have a preference for who's going first.
Just while you get situated on the student representative, I know there was a recommendation, or was it, I might even
Legislation, yeah.
a policy, right, where we would have
It's
a
actually a
student
law.
representative.
I can update you on that. They had no one run for it in the springtime. And so our elections are in 2 weeks.
Okay.
They're hoping to have somebody then. They were going to send a student council representative tonight, but they hadn't had a chance to sit down with Dr. Debbie myself. So I decided, let's just hold off until elections, get someone in position.
Thank you.
Thank you for the update. All right, Ms. Widman, the floor is yours.
Good evening. I am here tonight just to really update everybody on some of the things that we did this summer. So as always, we had a huge amount of professional learning that was going on through various resources, whether it was our Live to Learn, whether it was new teacher orientation, or we had a ton of teachers taking coursework and different workshops over the summer. So on my paper report, I just sort of listed out some of the things that we had people take training in. We did have a number of teachers attend the letters reading training, the OGAP math training. Both of those have been hugely successful across the state, and our teachers were really, the reports back were just phenomenal on those two. And then you can see just some of the different courses that teachers are taking right now to expand their own knowledge. Just an update, we haven't started any of our committee meetings yet. We have professional learning that will start in early October. We changed the structure a little bit, so I need to we need to get some reps on it before we can start meeting. That's why that's the only one that will start in October and not in September. Grading and reporting, we will meet on the 19th. Our competency-based leadership group will meet on the 26th, and PERC will meet on the 27th. And you have the, our dates are staying the same. If that changes, once the committee actually gets together, I will update the board. I do have a presentation.
If you power up, I will get it up on the screen there. Yeah, I'm sorry,
Oh.
I don't think the TV's on.
Mm-hmm.
You want to present it? You can.
I can present it. Yep. Maybe.
Yeah, let's give it a minute. It'll wake up.
Yeah, all right. So this is just a little overview of some of the things we did. And rather than necessarily sitting and listening to me talk a whole lot about it, what I asked teachers to do was sort of share their reflections and share some of their own thoughts and things that they learned and that they did in these things. These are all pieces that we offered as a district this summer. So, okay, it's a little slow, sorry. So first, and we've done this every summer since I started here, is our Live to Learn. We ran the last week, the week after school got out, so the 19th to the 22nd of June, and we also ran 3 days in August 7th through the 9th. So in June, we had 28 staff members attend, and in August, we had 33 staff members attend, and you can see there just sort of the breakdown. Our staff take advantage of this time. They really do. I can say that this has been one of the most successful things that we've implemented in terms of PD since I started here. It's just, they welcome the time to be able to come in teams, small groups. It's a mix of working on curriculum, working on building assessments, and workshops. We've teacher-led workshops that are going on throughout the entire day. So just to give you a little overview of what people did, the learning goals for independent work, at the end of the time, I put out a Google form and asked teachers to share some of the things that they did. So these are quotes coming right from teachers that attended. And then the different workshops that we had, they were all offered by staff, with the exception of the Discovery Ed. I will say that we brought in Nancy Rose from Discovery to do that training, but everything else was run by our staff. So we had Katie McGarry ran the strategies for social skills. Amy Provenzel and Karen Desjardins ran Google Sites. Janine Enkel ran strategies for building number sense. ChatGPT was Karen Desjardins. Nicole St. Jean ran a few. She ran how to create a choice reading unit, and competency-based assessments, and how to plan units and lessons in a workshop model. We had Noah Benoit ran a project-based learning and differentiation workshop. Corey Sullivan ran a couple workshops for us on implementing learning stations and using iReady. And then Denise Freeman ran a workshop on bookmaking. And many of those were the feedback that we got from teachers that attended was so positive that they've asked that we run some of them during the school year. So we're going to try and find ways to do that. And these are just some of I asked teachers to share their experience and the things that they took away, whether they led a workshop or whether they were just there doing work. So I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but you can just get a feel for some of the different grade levels and people that were present. Again, a lot of these are people that presented, but we offer this to anybody that works in the district. So we had some tutors come, we had some paraprofessionals attend. We had from grade 1 through grade 12. So the other thing during that first week in June, if you notice, our attendance was a little bit lower. Usually June is the busier of the weeks for us. But at the same time, we had responsive classroom training going on for staff at LMS. So it took a number of staff members from LMS out of that June week for the Live to Learn because they were focused on something else. So you can see that we had 29 staff members participate in the responsive classroom training. Varying degrees, most of them did the full 4 days, but a couple had conflicts, so they did part of the training. I asked LMS staff to give us some key thoughts and takeaways, so you can see Sarah Pooler, our new special educator, shared some of her thoughts, as did Audra McCollum. And then a late ad was, I saw this all around the building when I walked around LMS today, but this was shared with me this morning by Laura Dion, that the group that attended the training created these guidelines, community guidelines. And so you'll see that poster all over the building.
It was emailed to parents too as part of the introductions and welcome.
Excellent,
So.
excellent. So the last thing I wanted to share was about new teacher orientation. We do this every year, and it's a lot of the same structure, but one of the things that we've started doing, and I have to give Karen Desjardins the credit for this, is we always do a little bit of tech work, but we've tried to shift it over the years to make it more hands-on for the teachers. So she does this activity with them, and she did it last year and was not sure how it was going to go over, and I asked her to please do it again this year because I find it to be just, it says a lot about our staff. So I'm not going to make you watch the video, but if you haven't seen this video, it's definitely one worth watching. But the whole intro to the new teachers is knowing your why. Why are you here? Why are you teaching? Why are you in Litchfield? Whatever it may be. So we watched this video, and then, it's going to play anyway, sorry.
No, a lot of people.
This is on the website, so you can watch it at your leisure. So then we ask teachers to use their creativity on a slide, using different features of Google Slides and different tech tools that we have access to that Karen sort of walks them through to create their own why. So you can see Megan Glad was the first one to get back to me and say, yes, please use mine. It has the Jonas Brothers on it. I thought that was pretty cool. So they just, and again, they're all different. It really gives you a chance to get to know why the teachers are teaching or why they are here. Depending on what their role is. Again, this is Kate Deschard, who's our middle school counselor. So it gives you just a little feel for the new teachers. And this to me is just a great resource for us as a district to be able to say, these are the people we have. So now I have last year's and this year's full. This is just a sampling of them. I did ask teachers to, if they would let me use them. I did not use all of them. And is that the last one? Nope. And you, again, from all over. This is, I'm like, it looks like her name got cut off. Yes, that's Kara Carney. Our school nurse at GMS. And someone was fancy, and that's the end of my slideshow. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of the kinds of things that we did this summer and the feedback from some of the staff.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yes.
Seeing none. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. Miss Fowler, the floor is now yours.
So I kind of brought just an update of where special education is, kind of what we were doing, some summer updates and things like that. So the currently IEPs by school, there are 71 students at GMS, 75 at LMS and 89 at CHS. There are always a handful of others. I tried to be a little more descriptive. OOD is out of district, charter school, private schools. Temporary transition preschool is the students that come in at 2 years old. They kind of get dumped into that. So when I was pulling things, I pulled that number. The total active in the district as of August 18th was 248 students out of 1,100. That's roughly 21% of the students. So the state average is roughly 19%. We're not too far off. Since these numbers, though, I can tell you a number of students have moved in to the district. The other components that aren't captured are things like out of state where we don't get them in the system. So that number's probably slightly higher now. So extended school year went off really well. So GMS had 44 IEP students attend. Danielle Peckham was this year's coordinator, so she worked hands-on with Maura this year. That was really phenomenal to have that resource. I think to highlight the coordinators actually start along about March is when I start saying things need to ratchet up and pull together. So they're really on board from like March to the end of July. LMS had 25 students. Corey Sullivan did a fantastic job. I think it's really important to note that it was late in June when we had to pivot to the high school, and he did a phenomenal job with that pivot. So just we need to get everything transferred up. We need to make sure there's communication. I think it went really, really well. And that there were 14 students through Campbell High School. Jesse Anacopoulos did a phenomenal job with Jacob Hess, making sure that all ran smoothly and all the students were attended to. So at this time, all the special education teacher positions are hired, especially with so many being vacant, that I was really excited to have all of them hired going into this school year. Impact Academy was the resource that I talked about, I think, a couple meetings ago. That's offered through Manchester Community College. We did have 2 students attend that over the summer, so it's starting to get out. I anticipate we're going to have another one in the spring that's going to be able to go, so it's really a great resource. The students were getting several things from it. The job sites that over the summer the students were working at, one was working at the community college, I believe as a custodian, and the other one was working in the bookstore at the community college as part of that program. So that was really fantastic for them. ELL, so our English language learners, we have a brand new ELL teacher this year, Kara Carney. She's doing a phenomenal job. She and I have sat down. She's of course going to be district-wide across all of the 3 schools. One of the things that we realized going into having a new ELL teacher was that we didn't have a system set up for the required documents we're supposed to have in a cumulative folder. So she's helping to institute a system. The last time I met with her, she had actually chosen a beautiful bright green Kelly folder to put in, and in the front of the folder she has actually a checklist of everything that is supposed to be in that folder. That system was not there before, so we're setting the groundwork for what's coming forward and trying to fix that as we're moving along, which is really great. So one of the other things that was realized, I brought in a training at the beginning of summer, and about halfway through August I pulled in an ELL director from another school district. One of the things that came out of that I didn't know is the translation of documents. So a lot of our school notices that go home are supposed to be in the home language of the family. So I'm working on bringing on a translating system. You want a closed system, not an open system. So Google Translate is an open system. If you're not familiar with what that is, it means the meanings of words can be changed. A closed system means that the words they don't change. And I have found a program where you can drop in a PDF and it converts it to the language so it can be sent home very easily. So this year, for the summer that I worked on, so one of the things I really took a look at was reviewing our special education documents. As I was utilizing them last year, I realized there were 5 different headers, and it drove me absolutely bananas that we needed to have one solid header so that we could see what was a special education document and what wasn't. So I spent some time this summer. I had Danielle Schulz, our school psychologist, as well as one of our special educators from the elementary school join me and actually looking at all the forms and making sure that they were up to date and that kind of thing. It was a very time-intensive project to make sure that they said the things that they needed to say, but we're off to a good foot, which is really good. So I've also organized weekly or bi-weekly meetings with each SPED team so that they have the opportunity to meet with me throughout this school year. Last year I met with the elementary school almost weekly. We got to a point where we could move it to bi-weekly, so that moving forward is something that I'm doing at each of the 3 schools, which is great. So I'm meeting with most of our brand new case managers weekly for about a half an hour, so that we get the support if there are any challenges or anything that they have on their own, but also so that any of our brand new case managers, we've had quite a few that were, I'm going to say, brand new out of school this May. So making sure that I meet with them, so if they're having any challenges or any needs, that they can voice those needs, but have access to me so that there's support in place. Our child assistant team meetings are now scheduled with each school to meet for an hour with myself and the school psych, so on kind of a rotating schedule. So she's at one school, I'm at the next school, and then we rotate around. As we work towards the social, emotional, and behavior supports and the vertical alignment in each school, we have a vertical meeting scheduled once a month so that we can meet with the high school, middle school, and elementary school all together. That's more of a Zoom meeting. So I established and actually held a new case manager orientation day on August 14th. I invited all of them in. The purpose of that was to make sure that everybody had access, one, to the special education program NESSIS, but also that they had access to all the special education forms and got their caseloads, if anybody needed access to anything else in the immediate. That way when they hit the ground running on the first day, they're not scurrying around trying to get access on the first day. Sometimes those accesses can take 24 hours to update, so I wanted to make sure there was time built in. But also for anybody who was very type A and very organized, they had the opportunity to go through and read, make any organizational amendments or whatever they needed to do for themselves, so that they felt confident on the first day of school. So I sat for about, I think it was about 8 to 12 or 8 to 1 with them doing that, which was really fruitful time. And then, so I was able to contract a very specific paraeducator training. So last year, one of the things that kind of came out of the year was I'm going to say grumblings about how some trainings for paraeducators really wasn't there. So I spent a lot of time last year kind of pulling things together, trying to pull in, I sent out a Google form asking everybody, what's your confidence level? What do you need more information on? So I organized and brought in a training for the paraeducators on August 23rd, I believe it was, with a company called Cirriculum. When I introduced the company, I actually left their meeting so that they had the opportunity to have control of it and ask the questions they had without having any interference from either myself or from case managers or anything like that. When I went back after 6 hours, the fantastic thing was the mood in the room was very positive and everyone was very appreciative of the training. I have a copy of the book in my office. I bought 50 copies and I only have 3 left in my office. So I felt that that was really positive and phenomenal. When I left the meeting, I did tell them that I would be sending out a Google sheet to kind of say, okay, what else do you need information on, so that even our paraeducators, one, feel supported in their positions, but also that they're getting the training that they feel they need in order to provide what they provide. So I felt that
That's
that was
great.
really positive.
Any questions from the board?
Oh, great update.
How are we doing on paraprofessionals? I know
We're low on paraprofessionals.
yeah, do we have a count of how many openings we still have?
I don't have the last note that Holly sent out for what we needed to hire. I can tell you that we're
I
significantly
mean,
low.
the number we've used in the office is 20. We're down
Okay.
20. That's across the district, but it's
Yeah.
more impacting GMS than the other schools. And we'll get you a better number,
Okay.
but it's
Thank you.
around 20.
Thank you, Sophia.
Just one point before Sophia and Mary leave. So Mary talked about Live to Learn Academy, so reminder to the board that the administrators also retreat at that time, so we take that as an opportunity to, while the teachers are learning new skills, we try to bring more of an interactive, it's not a meeting per se, it's more conversation and dialogue. And that's actually proven to be very successful for us to get together as a team. So, in the past, we would actually retreat somewhere. We would go off to Southern New Hampshire University or somewhere to have a meeting. Now we're doing it really in the view of the teachers, so they understand that we're also learning and are professionals who are working on our craft. And to that point, I want to just highlight the ELL person who came in, provided 2.5-hour workshop, I think, for the administrative team, because we're seeing more students arriving without English language skills and needing ELL services. And I wanted to make sure that we as schools were ready to react to a student enrolling who was lacking the skill, and making sure that we can provide the support to our teachers. So we did that, and that was a fabulous workshop. And to me, the takeaway, and I'm going to say this to the board because it's this important that we understand it. We all understand special ed law. We all understand that as a civil rights matter, and that if we violate a student's right to an education, it's a civil rights violation. That exact same principle applies in the ELL realm. And that's really important to understand, that it's not a nice to have, it's a civil right. And so that really elevated for us wow, we need to be very quick and nimble, and making sure that we're ready when somebody arrives not speaking English to help them be educated in our schools. And so I appreciate that Sophia found a trainer for us. She was excellent. She knew things upside down and backwards, and it was great to have that training, and I think our team really benefited from that.
Thank you so much. And now Mr. Hess is going to join us to give a follow-up to his prior presentation regarding Campbell High School and high school rankings and graduation report.
I'm going to ask that he start with the graduation report because I goofed. That should have been linked when the high school came and gave their assessment data. And just with the flurry of emails and links to make, I overlooked this one. And so having the report on how students performed at the end of the year, I think is really important.
This document I'm giving you is for the next part of the report with the U.S. News ranking. It's just an outline of how they do the rankings and a breakdown of.
Bonus points for handouts, thank you.
I'll put it up there for folks at home to follow along.
Just a breakdown of our class of 2023, where they headed after leaving Campbell High School.
What is W20?
W20,
What is W20?
it's dropout.
Okay, got it. And what is high set?
It's the just taking like that to get your GG.
Okay.
Going
Okay.
about it that way.
And at the bottom, there's a nice list of, Jake, are these acceptances or?
These are where the students actually attend.
Where they actually,
Yes.
yep.
We don't have enough paper to list.
All the acceptances.
Yes. Some of them apply to a lot of colleges and get accepted to a lot of them, so.
This seems to be kind of on par with years past.
Yeah.
My understanding is it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm happy that 100% of our students had a plan. Some of them, if we can reduce that W20 and taking the Londonderry Adult Ed program and doing that in-house will make a big difference there too.
Great. Any other questions on the report?
No, thank you for
All
the
right,
summary.
straightforward. Thank you.
As far as the U.S. News ranking, I kind of put this data in order of what I thought was, a relatively logical way to kind of flow through it. On the handout next to you have kind of how they actually do the rankings. So there's 6 categories that they look at when they do the rankings. They rank just under 18,000 public high schools in the country. The 6 categories are college readiness, college curriculum breadth, state assessment proficiency, state assessment performance, underserved student performance, and then the graduation rate. And so each one of those categories is ranked with a percentage, and it kind of breaks down what each one of those categories means. When it goes to the state assessment proficiency, they used either the 2020-21 data or the 18-19 data, or an average of the two. Because of COVID, they kind of tried to average out those data to make sure there was no super highs or super lows. So these rankings are based upon that data. So I kind of started off with just, here we are in the national rankings of things, just under 7,000 in the national rankings out of the just under 18,000. In the state of New Hampshire, we're 36. And then in the Manchester metro area, number 13. That scorecard on the right, that 60.61, that's the score they get from those 6 categories. It's out of 100, so that puts us in the 60th percentile of high schools in the country. And then it kind of breaks it down from all of those. The ranking factors, how we performed nationally and statewide out of the 85 schools, shows you a little bit of where we lie in the state and in the country, and a little bit more of those breakdown sections for how we got to that. And then you'll notice that our state assessment performance rank there of 78th in the state. That's probably the biggest number that jumps out at us, especially at the same time, with our graduation rate rank being number 3rd in the state. So we're graduating students, and we're underperforming pretty highly on our state assessments. A breakdown of our demographics, because one of the categories, 10% of the ranking, is based upon how our diverse students perform. So I thought it was important to look at what the demographics were of those students at the time, and broke that down a little bit. And then each next thing just kind of breaks down and shows how we performed in each category as the ranking. And there's a nice little description of what scores they use and kind of how they look at it.
Is that it?
Yeah, I mean it's
Okay.
pretty straightforward data. I mean, if you look at the handout that
not good.
breaks it down,
Yeah.
It gives
work
it
to be done.
a little bit more.
What were we last year? Do we recall that?
Similar. I have it on my desk, and I want to say 40th in the state, and so 36 this year. So we're hovering in about the same spot. And the other piece, this measure here, which is the well below expectations, that's been the theme. That's been a recurring pattern that has been reported on this year in and year out.
So I'm trying to balance this all in my mind, right? So state assessment, we're number 78, which is terrible, right? Our graduation rate rank is very high at 3, which is good. Our SAT scores is well below expectations. And the overall just like when we look at the other chart that you just presented with the number of kids or children with a plan is good, right? So how do I balance bad tests, bad state performance, high graduation rate with what we just saw with the vast majority of the students having a plan? Like, it's not lining up in my mind somehow.
Yeah, I think we have to, obviously we know that there's progress that needs to be made on how our students are doing the state exams. We're performing below average for the state rate, for our neighboring, schools that we compare ourselves with. We're not performing where we think we are. And at the same time, we have students leaving with a plan, attending colleges. So I think that with all things, we have to look at a large section of data and not just we know we need to improve on the state assessments. We know that the science scores are down. We know that the math scores are down. We're working on improving on that. But we're getting kids into good universities. Kids are being successful, or they're going and getting jobs. They're going into the military. So it is, yes, it doesn't line up, but I think that there is a nice balance of we're serving a more diverse learner population than maybe the school has in the past. I think our kids are taking more varied paths than they have before. And so I think we need to continue to strive for improvement and also continue to support our varied levels of learners and those that have a different goal and pathway after they leave us. And that's making sure we focus on those Londonderry kids and keep them in-house and work with them. Focus on our kids that want to join the military and make sure they're prepared for that. Our kids that just want to get out of here and go work, let's make sure they're ready for that and do that. All with the same goal of making sure that we can improve in all the other areas as well.
I think the other thing that I'm balancing in my mind is just the feedback that the board has received from past students going into their post-high school paths, right? Saying that they are not ready, that what they're learning at Campbell is not making them ready for that next chapter.
Yeah, I talked with Val Nelson about trying to do something better with being able to track more alumni data. Again, I've heard it as well. I'm not diminishing it at all. We don't have any actual numbers that I've seen data-wise for how many students were successful, how many students were, home after semester one or after year. So I haven't seen those numbers. I know Naviance that we use has alumni surveys, so we're talking about how we can better track our alumni data so that we can have a better sense of are students struggling or are students not being successful. And I think there's a big difference between those two. Change is tough. Students are going to struggle, understanding that. But can we make sure that they learn through that struggle and they can continue to be successful after that? So that's something we're working on to try to get more data so we can really take a look at where we actually fall with our alumni.
I think the other piece that I struggle with is I think there has, at least in the past, been such an emphasis on state testing and, we're not a good school unless we are testing well on a state level. And over the past, decade, 2 decades, I think there's been a step back from that to say that you can learn in different ways. There are different ways to teach, there are different ways to learn, and there are different ways to show that you're proficient in something besides a state test. And so I look at the graduation rate and say, okay, we have students that may not have tested well, but they are moving forward successfully. It appears they're moving forward successfully in their career. And so obviously when I look at these numbers, I want us to be higher, but when I look at our scorecard, AP exams, mathematics, reading, science proficiency, all of those are very heavy. It seems like it's ranked very heavily regarding state assessments, essentially, or AP exams.
It's 100% how they rank it.
Yeah, and graduation rate, I guess, would be the other 10%. But 90% of it is very heavy on this piece. And I think if there's anything I've learned in the 2.5 years I've been on the board is that particularly with competency-based grading, that it's not the way that it used to be, and it's not all about the state assessments anymore. It's broader than that. It's a part of it, and it's an important part of it, but it's
absolutely
broader.
And please don't think that I'm diminishing this at all, because we're working towards improving on this. I think we're 100% underperforming. That SAT scores relative to U.S. News expectations, that well below expectations. Mm-hmm. They take a look at your demographics and say, oh, we think you probably should have performed better, because again, it's the zip code, and they take a look at that, and that's how they make that, decision on it. But, I think that you're right. 80% of schools are test optional now with state assessments. We still want to get better at those things. But again, I think it's important that when we talk about student achievement, are we looking at all of the data and not just some? With the caveat of we're working to get better at this part of the data as well.
Is it fair to say, and I've heard this, again, I'm just getting to the point where I have to pay attention to this stuff, having a junior, but there are colleges out there that aren't even requiring SAT scores anymore.
80% of colleges are not test optional.
So you have where there was such a, I feel like during my years, there was such a huge emphasis on you have to take the SATs, you have to do well, you have to get a high score in order to get into college. That bar isn't there anymore. I don't know if that changes the motivation for students. I don't know that is not the end all be all in terms of getting into college anymore.
I think it's an important test for some.
Yep.
Or for many, and it's our state exam, so we're going to put some importance on it.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to change our instructional practice in the classroom so that students are going to be more and more better prepared for that style of test without teaching to the test. And yeah, we're going to continue to work on all sets. On all facets of it.
I agree with you. It's not the be-all, end-all, but to me, what they're doing is they're taking this demographic profile that explains Litchfield, plus the poverty rate, plus, they look at all sorts of stuff. The mother's education rate has a huge impact on student performance, et cetera. And they're saying, how should Litchfield be performing, given all those positive factors that exist in this community? And for us to be 78, shoulder to shoulder with schools that we aren't shoulder to shoulder with,
Right.
that is the thing that we're having dialogue about.
Yeah.
Because they're having the same conversations. They're also coming up with alternative pathways for kids who need alternative pathways. They're finding ways to, pull somebody through the knothole one way or another, right? Everybody's doing exactly the same thing. We're still underperforming. And
Yeah.
so that's the piece that, we really need community buy-in, because the theme I'm hearing from the board is, why are so many kids making honor roll and not performing? It's been a question, right? There's a disconnect.
And there was a notion made at our last meeting that perhaps the grades are being driven by parents who are emailing staff directly.
And so the question is, are we committed to really having our students show what they know and can do on a variety of measures? And again, I just expect them to do that in the same way that is happening in other communities similar to ours. We're not comparing ourselves to an inner city with, a whole different host of problems from
We've chosen
us.
our peer cohort based on
Yes.
demographics in each
You know,
town and similar sized schools.
The board has said, take a look at Hopkinton, take a look at Bow,
Bow,
take a look
yeah.
at Moulton Borough, communities that are similar, and that's exactly what US News and World Report is doing. They've just done the work for us, because they have a formula behind the scene, and they assign a number, and they put it nationally. But, they're comparing us to Bellevue, Washington also, because that's the type of community that they are. And so, that to me is the magic of it. We are underperforming, and our team recognizes that. And another thing that's important, this isn't a high school scenario. 90% of our kids come all the way through Litchfield schools. 90% are at Griffin, to the middle school, to the high school. And so this is something that we have to embrace as a staff across the board, because if we're making a year's growth every step of the way, then it's going to pay off at the high school level, right? And so, as much as Jake is here presenting this data, I can assure you I'm having conversations with 3 principals about how do we do better on this? Because the honor roll question came up at the middle school. That wasn't at a high school
Right.
level. The high school honor roll numbers are actually, I think, reasonable.
Way lower than we thought it was going to be.
So again, it's a systemic thing. And by the way, it's not a one-year fix.
No, it's not.
It's a systematic approach that we have to make to this, and I think that's important people understand too.
And it
so.
requires, like you said, buy-in from the community, buy-in from the parents, that academics need to be primary focus of our schools.
Well, and
Why we do what we do.
I'm not saying this, but we have heard from some parents that the state test doesn't matter. Don't put a lot of effort into it. That doesn't matter. Okay, but here are the results.
Right.
This is how Campbell is ranked, and what a result of that is. And so, putting your best effort into whatever's in front of you is the lesson I always learned. Whether you like it or not, you put your best effort in. And so, on some level, that's the piece that I think we've got to do some work on.
I think that your attitude, it sounds like the attitude is correct. It's acknowledging the fact that there's a problem, that there is work to do, that this needs to be addressed. And I think the steps that we've talked about taking, for example, even the handbook change of more students taking the AP exams. If you're taking an AP class, you have to take the AP exam, could have an impact on potentially these rankings, right?
Also have a
Because
negative impact.
it could. It absolutely, it could go either way, but it's something, with having more buy-in with the competency-based grading, with having homework graded now, with that 15% that's been out there, you know, whether or not any of these changes impact this, I think it'll be interesting to see.
I think a broader conversation that we should have, and I would like to have, is what's the approach or the expectation for how we tackle this? You know, is this, you know, because Andrew might have an idea for what he wants to do. I have an idea for how I would like to approach this. You know, Dr. Jetty may have an idea for what he thinks we approach. So having that conversation to see, you know, what our next steps are, because again, you know, there's different ways to approach this. And I just want to make sure that we're aligned on that I'm aligned on where you want me to go. I want to see the scores go up. I want to create a school that works for everybody. You know, and I have plans and thoughts for how to go about that. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So, you know, those conversations are important.
Have we reached out to our neighbors, Nashua, who scored higher than us, Wyndham, who scored very high, right?
Yeah, Wyndham was,
London,
I think, third in the
right?
state.
Londonderry. I mean, why are we trying to recreate the wheel here when it seems like good is already working within our neighbors? And if you don't know that, that's okay.
No, and
It's a
I
thought
don't,
that I have,
because
right?
again, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we can. Why do you think your kids are scoring better on state assessments? Definitely, I can have that conversation with.
What are they doing differently, right?
Bo's 15th overall. I don't know what their ranking was, but you know, I worked with their principal. I can have that conversation. You know, I know a counselor at Wyndham High School. I can have that conversation. So.
I think that's a starting point. There's nothing wrong with stealing anybody's good idea, you know, why recreate it?
I mean, just because I work in a different district, you know, as an educator, I think a big part of it is community support. You know, when you have a community that is willing to support the schools and support the teachers and, you know.
Are you saying that the community hasn't? Because I'm pretty sure the last several years, everything's been passed. I mean,
It has, but why did you run for the board? Because you disagreed with what was happening, right? Why did Peter run for the board? Because he wanted to come in and fix things. Not necessarily knowing everything that goes on behind the scenes, you know? I think we have a lot of people in town who don't support our school systems. I see it every day on Facebook. And not to say that those other towns don't have the same, you know, the same buy-in, but you know, when I look at the ballot where I work in Bedford, you know, we passed a support staff contract, and it didn't pass by 52%. It passed by 80%, and I think that sends a message to the people that work in our schools, and the people in our town, you know, as a district, that we, you know.
And I think it's also important to add, you know, what does support from the community mean? Does it just mean voting yes on
Not
all the ballots?
necessarily.
Right, like, so what are we're looking for more, you know, engagement and partnerships, you know, and we can talk about all those things as well, but again, year 2 in this community.
Right.
I'm glad everything passed last year. I'm hoping everything passes this year.
Right.
That would be wonderful if we can continue that, you know, but it's, I would also, you know, as we open up, you know, my monthly chats with, you know, the community, I hope we get a lot of parents out. You know, as I start my Campbell Community Council and really want to get people involved, I hope I have people that would want to do that.
And having been here for 7 years and working on exactly that, that was one of the reasons I ran for the board, was to increase, you know, I wanted everybody in town to know what's going on in our schools. It's been a long road, but we still have a large contingent in our community that does not support the district. So I don't know how to fix that, other than continuing to plug away at what we've been trying to do.
I'm going to try with smiles and bad jokes. That's
I
my
tried
approach.
that.
We'll see if it works.
But I'm just, you know, that's something to think about too.
So, you know, one thing that's emerging, Mary and I had this conversation today. Our teachers are all islands, starting in the middle school. And what I mean by that is Mr. Sulzin and Ms. Love are the math teacher at the grade level and the
Right.
science teacher at the grade level.
Right.
So they're responsible for all the horizontal and trying to maintain some vertical, what's up and what's down, right? Versus the school districts you're citing, have multiple teachers at that grade level. And so you just take the notion of PLCs, the ability to collaborate, they're out implementing the same lesson. The standards are clear. They can talk through the standards with a colleague who's going to implement the standards. That's a difference that exists in Litchfield. And it's like, what are we going to do about that? Because we're not going to add another math teacher, right? We're not going to add another science teacher. That's given the scope and the size. But we have to find ways to make sure that our teachers are able to have that collegial conversation, because some of this does come back to the standards and the expectations. And well-meaning people who are just operating on the island are blind to some things. They're just not going to see some things, right? And so that's, how do we fix that? How do we bring more to the table? That's the kind of conversation that we're having, because we're not just going to add to it. Campbell's in a different scenario, because you have 4 English teachers and they're able to have dialogue, and some may be teaching the same course, right? So it is a little bit different. And again, that's not a dig at anybody. It's just the function of who we are compared to, I think I heard you say Wyndham and
Bo.
Yeah, just referencing the ones that I saw.
Because I work there.
yeah. And so they do have that, it's a different structure there. So we have to find ways to make up for that.
Is that just a factor of our population, the student population?
No, well, given the size, right? The fact that we have 90 kids per class, and so, 4 classes head off to math class, and that's Mr. Sullivan's assignment. So it's not the population per se, it's just the structure of how many students can a teacher have, and how many do we need them to do that? And we've shrunk enough that we're at that level.
That's what I meant by population, student population.
Yeah.
So we've implemented a number of changes, right? No doubt, and that to your point, Heidi, will be very interesting to see and monitor, absolutely. What else needs to be a part of the plan, right? And that's where I need support from the educators, those in the profession, right? To inform the board, to inform me about what you recommend, because I don't know. Like, I don't have these answers.
What's the venue to do that? I mean, is it, I've got my approach and what I want to do. I think 16 years in education, I've seen success in the approach that I want to take.
So let's share it, right? Let's talk about it.
I
Let's
think
have those
that
conversations.
When we're talking about getting test scores up at the high school without teaching to the tests, I think we need to bring in an instructional coach. Not because teachers aren't good at instruction, but someone that's dedicated to being a resource, a coach, bring in ideas and bounce ideas off of, that is their job. That's where I've seen success as an administrator when we've had that position. I had that position at the regional, and that person, non-evaluative, they are there as a helper for teachers. If you want to get better at golf, you get a golf coach. You don't ask me because I've watched golf. Hey, Jake, help me golf here. Yeah, I can. Hey, yeah, that swing looks weird. But a golf coach is going to help you be a better golfer.
Yeah.
An instructional coach, in my opinion, bringing in to the building, can work with teachers every single day to have them get better at what they do in the classroom. And then they're better educators. The kids are receiving a better education, more buy-in. That's where I see the trickle-up effect.
Love
that
it.
I have seen in the past.
And I think too,
Let's put a plan together to do that. That's a great idea.
Right, I think implementing the PLCs.
And again, that's my approach. If that's not the direction that we think we want to go.
That's a contract position that we have to
Correct.
budget for, if
and-
that's what we want to do.
Well, you have to budget for it. It has to be a standalone warrant article, and it has to be supported by
Right.
50% of the voters. That is a difference in Litchfield.
Yeah.
Just, I want to say that.
It's a difference in Litchfield, but if there's a need, I'm willing to bet that this town gets behind us.
I agree, but we have to sell it and pitch it and explain it. And to Tina's point, there are detractors who say, oh, wait, a person who's not even working with kids?
Yeah.
You have professional educators who, why do they need a coach? So the point being, if the board is willing to commit and get behind it, and to have the budget committee support it, because we also know how that goes. We know how the vote goes relative to budget committee votes, right? That's another difference in Litchfield that doesn't exist in the other communities. And
Will there be no votes in the budget committee? Yes.
Yes.
Will there be yes votes in the budget committee? Yes.
Will there be a majority vote on the budget committee?
That
We don't know
remains to be
that,
seen.
right? But,
It could be a 5-4, I don't know.
okay, but you understand that depending on which 5-4 that is, makes all the difference, right?
So when you
can.
say
Yeah.
it's different in Litchfield, explain that to me. Why is it different in Litchfield?
Because other communities will, did you have to add it to a warrant article in order to get it in White Mountains?
We
No.
took a FTE, a full-time teaching position, and said, you're no longer teaching this, you are now an instructional coach. And she said, awesome. And she was an amazing instructional coach. She's now an assistant principal.
And that's exactly what we did in
not a
Merrimack
net new
Valley.
hire.
It wasn't a vote of the community. It was,
Right.
you
The
know,
board has the
the board has the
legal
discretion
authorization
within
to
its
do that
bottom
within
line
the
budget to make that shift. And
Right. The school I work at, we needed a behaviorist, so they hired a behaviorist, because that's what we needed to
I
do.
mean, I'm looking back at the tech integrator
yeah.
positions debacle, you know? I mean,
And
we
the
got
special
one, but
education
there was,
coordinator that we
yeah.
tried to get for 2 years. That is still a pressing need. It's
I
still
was not
too
asking
much.
to solve all the problems. I'm just like, all right, now that we've heard all the not so great data, right? I know we've done some things to hopefully move the needle. What else are we thinking about, right? Let's just not talk about it. Let's start to think about and action it.
I hope you see that we are. That didn't just, he didn't make that up.
No, I know,
Right.
right.
Okay.
And I know we are.
Yeah.
Right? And I know by basis of some of the motions that we've made and approved that we are moving, or we're trying to move the needle, but there's more work to do.
Yes.
I have a plan B that's a little bit less expensive too, so if that can't work, I do have a plan B, so.
Why don't we talk about all the plans that we have?
Yeah.
Why are we piecemealing them? Why don't we just talk about all the ideas, throw them up on the wall?
And I don't know that
I don't
needs to be
think that's
tonight.
tonight.
That doesn't need to be
No, it might
tonight.
not be tonight. It might be some other thing, but.
Well,
Because we don't know what the answers are.
let us, I mean, it's September 6th, and Doug has already set all the meetings up for budget development, and we're already beginning that work for next year, right? So let us bring that forward as we get into that process, because, you know, that's part of what our team has to try to figure out, and then to set priorities around.
Is part of it too, making sure the parents aren't driving the grades? Because I've heard that a few times. Is it because parents are writing to the school or calling the school?
How do you
saying,
do
I
that,
want
though?"
Sally to be on the honor roll. I want that little certificate. How do we back up the teachers when Sally earned a C and she's going to get a C no matter how many times you call?
So, boy, that's a big conversation.
I think
That's a much bigger conversation.
I think one, well, and I also think one ways is just cleaning up the handbook, which we're attempting to do, because, you know, in the past, the late work policy was kind of open to interpret, there's that line of, you know, if we make things more cut and dry, and then the answer is always, we're following the handbook policy, you know, that's much easier than, well, you know, it's teacher discretion, so I'm not going to do that. You know, there's less. So if we can start cleaning up some of those things, which we worked on doing this summer, we'll continue to, every summer to look at that language and do that. I think that's one step forward in the right direction. And again, I think getting more community involvement in our building, to talk about what we do and how we approach things. I'm hoping that helps, and we see some benefits from that this year. I think Dan and Jen are doing the same thing with bringing people in, so you'll see that across all three buildings this year, which will be nice. So I think that those are some steps we're currently trying to do that. And it, we need to rebrand the high school, who we are and what we do and what we offer. And that's a big goal of mine this year, is to really kind of resell what Campbell High School is and why we're here and what we want to do for kids. And we're doing a lot of work right now with kids with revisiting our core values. We started our work study practices this week and really looking at those and getting kids to understand those, getting parents to understand those, and really understand who we are and who our educators are.
And I think that doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
I think that happens at every level of the district, and the community.
Yeah.
So
I think you've got I could say at least 4 board members here that are fixers, right? That's why we want to tell us how can we fix it? What do we need to do? But I'm not sure it's as simple as that for this.
That's also one of those things that you want to say, we're going to do this thing, and then 4 months from now, we're like, why are we still spinning our tires?
I'm
Right.
honest.
You know,
Yeah.
again, any large scale change is
Takes
going
time.
to take 3 to 5 years to get those maximum results. Again, I'd love to say next year, when we're having that conversation about SAT scores, I'm hoping we see a little bit of a bump. I don't know if it's going to happen though. 2 years from now, I believe we're going to see a bump. 3 years from now, I think we're going to see more. Because we are talking now about this vertical alignment with CHS, LMS, and GMS. We are working towards having those conversations with all the principals and the superintendent in doing that work. We are talking with Mary, and Mary getting in with the CFs and doing those curriculum. So I think we're moving in that direction. Yeah, this stinks to look at that graph from the 2020, 2021 data and say, this is where we are. I just want us to be realistic about where we're going and how long it's going to take us to get there.
And I think it's important to note as well that this isn't 22-23 data. This is 2021 data. And 2021 was a completely different year than 22-23 was.
In every school.
Agreed.
This,
Agreed.
again, we just have to
Yeah.
remember that we're comparing pandemic to pandemic.
Right. But the data's from them.
Yes,
So
agreed.
we haven't
Yep.
yet seen the,
It's
you know,
apples to
what
apples,
improvements
so.
we've been making.
It could be worse though, so I don't want to talk about that.
Right.
So I say all this, we're talking about it, sometimes I think this is the work of an ad hoc committee of some kind, but then I also think this is the work of the admin. Like, you bring your idea, you guys are the experts, tell us what we should be doing so we can vote
Be
on it,
informed.
debate on it, and then advocate for it.
Help bring in the community to support it.
Exactly. So I think, I don't want to put the cart before the horse in terms of, you guys are already doing it. You're having these conversations and this dialogue in terms of how to best proceed. And I think what we're here saying is, bring us some ideas and we're ready to talk about them and push them forward or debate them.
We got your back. We want the same goals too.
Is that an email? You want like an email from me?
I don't want an email. No more emails. No, I don't know. It can be an email, but I think we need to get it forward in some way or another. But when you're ready, I mean, I don't know that it's a piecemeal conversation. I think you're right in the sense that we should just put it on the agenda and have the conversation. But when the time is right. So, any other questions for Mr. Hess? Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We are moving into community comment on agenda items. If there's anyone here from the public that would like to speak, this is limited to 3 minutes per person, and these comments are made without the expectation of a response. So is there anyone here that would like to provide any community comment or input on any of the agenda items for tonight?
Hi, I'm Corey Solzen, the 5th grade math teacher in this district. So I was not here last meeting, but I did watch it online. So there was some pieces because it's me. We talk about 5th grade math scores, and we're talking about my class. We're not talking about anything else. So I want to make sure that I share information that you may or may not have, and maybe that'll help clarify why do we see this disparity of grades and scores and such. One, it's a snapshot. So it's how that kid is in that one moment, in that one day, in that one class. So they could be having a bad day, be a phenomenal student, and bomb, they can't retake it. For all of my summatives, and even if we didn't have this where you could retake 2 summatives, math's important. We don't say you can't read a picture book, here's the Odyssey. We go, here's the Odyssey in picture book format. We don't do that with math. Oh, you can't do linear equations? Let me have you do linear equations. So it really is, we need to give that foundation, and why I spend so much time talking about foundation, and you'll see 3rd, 4th grade homework going home in 5th grade. It's because it's a foundational build and not just working on those high level skills all the time. So besides the gaps that we have from the pandemic, and math has always been gaps, always. So we talk about the gaps widening because of the pandemic, but this has always been a problem. It's never been oh, kids are always awesome at math. They've always struggled. It's because we expect them to do probably about 2 years worth of math every year. It's impossible for most third graders to memorize all of their multiplication facts. That's the expectation. So fourth grade, they're spending that whole year memorizing multiplication facts. And that's a whole year. Now they're behind. So they come to fifth grade and they don't know their multiplication facts. So not only I can't have them multiply fractions when they can't multiply whole numbers and decimals and large numbers, etc. So there's that gap, and it widens as we increase in grade level. So that is something to consider. We had construction. So there was a week that I was on a cart in half of a gym. So classes were not traditional. I got my classroom the night before kids came in the building. I was in that school. My room was the last one to get finished because it's where all the ductwork is. So like classroom setup last year for any teacher, not just me, was really tough. And I mean, I went from one classroom to another, and I have a lot of stuff. And resources. But math should be hands-on, so I should have these things. SEL is really important, especially in this pandemic. And where do you teach that? So I have a 50-minute block.
Sorry, SEL.
Social emotional learning. So if you don't know that, that's a really big acronym in education and has been for a while now, but especially the pandemic, because they're missing soft skills. So not only do I have to teach them math, but I have to, like today, I had to teach them how to walk across the room with scissors correctly. And I modeled it and did all the responsive classroom training correctly. And still you have students walking across the room with scissors with the blade up.
Better not be my kid.
So I'm just saying, like, these soft skills are also needing classroom time to fix and to work on and model and talk about. And then kids, the high trauma that students have brought in just others outside school, making sure that they're okay. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I hope, do you know that at all? So that need, like, you have to be top tier to be ready for education. When they're hungry, like, right? I'm skip breakfast. Well, I didn't want to go to breakfast, but I didn't eat it at home, so now I'm hungry. Well, okay, well, the teacher can either offer them a snack or, right? So there's just all of these pieces that we don't test. Like being a good person, having play, like working on the lunchroom, walking back as a class quietly and not interrupting things. That all takes time, and it's not built into a schedule. So it's a lot of pieces that every educator, and not just myself, but I can speak just for these scores, is my grades are high because they can retake any test until they've shown mastery. And my grades represent that the skills that I'm putting in Power School are the skills that they truly can do. Are some of the skills below grade level? 100%, because that's where they are. And if they can't do this skill, how can I expect them to do that next skill? And if we're always having them start where they can't do something, they're not going to be math people. They're going to hate math, right? Think of how many people hate math because they didn't get what they needed. So it's a couple things like that. I want, as we talk about test scores and paras, you asked about paras. We had very, very minimal para staff, and the paras that we had moved to Florida, were sick, and that was the year. There was another one that left us. So one has constant health issues. So we lost paras constantly throughout the year. That's not even being fully staffed with paras that we should have had. And do you remember talking about whether fifth grade should have had a fifth teacher? Do you remember having that conversation last summer? Yeah, guess what the answer should have been? And if I had known, because I changed from sixth to fifth, I would have been here. And I would have said, the answer is always yes to another teacher. If the question is, do we need another teacher? And kindergarten, the same kind of me screaming in the background, is the question is, do we need another teacher? If you ever ask that, the answer is yes, because students win. A class of 24, and I'm sorry I'm taking too much time and I'll end this, but a class of 24 is a lot. And it might not seem like a lot, and that traditional students had 30, 50 students, but they sat there in fear and they weren't allowed to do a lot of things. Students are able to move around the room and learn at their own pace and get extra help and extra support and leave for this or that if they need it. It's very different than what we're used to in that traditional schoolhouse. So it's things that I hope that you consider when we look at scores, when we look at the amount of work that every educator and even all of you put into this. It's not because we're not all trying. It really is because we're working in a farmer's school day, and we're expecting that we're doing double that amount of work every single day, and we're falling behind because it's impossible for anyone, even the best person. And when we burn out teachers or students, it's because we're asking too much sometimes. So I'm sorry for taking up too much time, but I hope that
Thank
helps
you.
a little bit.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Anyone else here for community input? Seeing none, I will close community comment and thank you for providing your input. We appreciate it. There will be another community input at 8 o'clock or at that point in the agenda, whichever comes first. Moving on to correspondence. So I'm going to admit I failed. We don't have a vice chair right now, and I did not do the correspondence for tonight. So I will make sure it is done for the meeting on the 20th. So we're going to skip over that for tonight. General business, moving into superintendent's report.
Yep, so a couple of things. We continue to make adjustments to the website. So the new website is up and running. We're learning some things about that website, and what you see on a device versus a mobile device isn't exactly the same. And so, for example, the menus, right? So one of the things that, probably menus are on the top 5 things that parents are trying to access, and the way we had those linked made perfect sense on the computer. The assumption was that it played the same, and it didn't. And so we made some adjustments when we got feedback on that. So we keep at it. I would just remind people a couple of things, and so this is for the public and the board. On the home page, there is a button to provide feedback. So if you see something that's broken, out of date, not working correctly, click the button, add it, and we'll get the feedback and we'll be able to make that adjustment. So
Is that on mobile too?
and I believe it's on mobile because it's one of those quick find buttons at the bottom of the district page. So please get that, use that to get
Find it fast.
information in. And you know, we're never going to be 100% right with the website, but we're striving to make it as user friendly and useful as possible. So please do that. And then the other thing is that there is a website committee. Andrew's the rep to that. And I don't know, do you know when the next meeting is, Andrew? Have they put one out?
Nope, don't know.
Don't know. All right, so let me prompt Chris to get a meeting set up because we need to get all the people who are tasked with the website updates in the one space so that we can make sure that we keep that fresh and useful for everybody. Is there any other feedback or comment for me about the website?
I'm just looking at the menus, it looks pretty easy to find.
Well, now it is.
It wasn't before. No.
It was in a side menu, and the side menu wasn't visible. So once we moved it to the main menu in the center of the page, that's what you see when you log in. Sometimes, although we did find there was another, it's really weird. Like this type of menu doesn't appear, the one in the middle does, and the one on the other side does. So it just moves to the bottom. But for some reason, there was a sub-menu issue that we didn't understand was going to happen. So we got it.
Thank you to Mr. Jamrog and Mr. Totten and others who have supported, because I've definitely shared a good portion of the feedback over the past few weeks, so.
It's still a huge improvement over what it was before we launched.
Yeah,
so.
it's much cleaner feel. So opening days of school I have students, but also I want to comment on staff. So we had a great opening with staff at the beginning of the year. Teachers appreciated the day in their classroom to get settled and to get adjusted in. We then had the district-wide day. A lot of energy in the auditorium, and I want to thank the folks who were able to make it. I know people were working also, but it was good to see board members there and supportive and to get us off to a good start. We went on tours of GMS, very eye-opening for our staff that drive by GMS but don't live in GMS. They don't work in GMS, and for them to be able to walk through GMS and really to get a sense of the conditions there, that was very helpful to them. And then we provided folks with time for all the mandatory training that we're required to do, and so people were able to work on getting that accomplished. And then finally, there was a building-based day where everybody could make sure that they were ready for students on Monday. So it was a busy week for us, and then students arrived on Monday, and we had 4 great days of school. Everything worked pretty well. There were minor little things, buses always run a little slower at the beginning of the year than they do, but we're in a nice routine now. I was talking with Dan today. He feels really good about where he is with GMS parents and able to get the line off of 3A. Everybody's cooperating with the color schemes and showing up at the right times and all of that. And he's able to manage that through pretty well and to get everybody started on time. So it really has been a smooth start for us all. And it's great to see the student energy back in the building. So a couple of blips that did occur. So we lost an HRV at the middle school, which is the unit that helps to control the climate in the room. So one of the new units went offline for us. That made it warmer than any of us wanted it to be. And we had just promised that we were done and ready to go, and it stopped working. So they worked diligently over the weekend and got it back up and going. But we're continuing to tweak that system. Remember, that system was finalized days before school. To be honest, it was like that last week that everything in the cafeteria came on. And so now we're just doing last adjustments to it. So bear with us while our commissioning agents make sure that everything is done correctly and get us the reports, and we'll make all the adjustments that we need to.
Is that the same unit that previously failed?
It is the same unit that previously failed, and this was a different failure, a different type of failure. So previously the compressor had stopped working.
Sorry.
This time it had a, what do you call it, a Freon leak? It's not Freon, but whatever the coolant is, leaked out, and so then it didn't have enough to operate. And then the other piece is we just got word today that the cooler, so the refrigerator and the freezer in the new kitchen, that has been repaired. That was just, it was compressor 1, compressor 2, logic board 1, but they finally have everything up and going, and that's ready for use. So that's the good news. It's functioning. And then the other piece is, you can't make this stuff up. There's like electrical gremlins in Litchfield because the power pole outside of Campbell yesterday, we lost the phase at Campbell High School, and so all the air handler units shut down because they didn't have enough electricity to operate. The phones went down, the internet went down, and unfortunately, when Campbell's phones and internet go down, so goes the district. Everybody loses phones and internet. We called Jolton. He diagnosed it that it was definitely an EverSource phase issue. They had somebody come out. They found on the pole a red-hot, glowing connector and had to replace that because it was just not designed to deal with the heat and whatever was going on yesterday. Everybody's air conditioners on. Whatever was happening yesterday, it wasn't designed for that. So we got that fixed. But it left us with this weird communication thing. I'm like, if you need to get a hold of us in an emergency, call. And I'm like, who are they going to call? Every phone is down. So I finally had to call the police because they can radio to us so we can at least hear from dispatch. And truly, I was hoping that that's an emergency. It's not, hey, Johnny left his sneakers and I want to bring, no, don't call the police about Johnny's sneakers. Call us if there's an emergency. You can get through to us. And it worked out very well. Everybody understood that, and as soon as it was back up, we got messages out relative to that. So opening days, we're off and rolling. And if you see me texting over here, it's because the South Central superintendents are getting pushback from communities about it's too hot for school tomorrow. And I said, I haven't heard that yet. And I'm feeling like we've got this. When it came to having our athletic practices, we said, let's be reasonable about it. Optional practice, if a parent doesn't want their kiddo there, don't have your kiddo there. If your kiddo's there, we're going to take a diminished role. We're not going to run 3 miles. We're going to take it easy. We're going to make sure there's plenty of hydration, and that's exactly what we need to do in our classrooms, and trust our professionals to be able to manage that. I'm pretty confident that we can make that happen.
How hot is it supposed to be tomorrow? I haven't looked at the weather.
93.
95. I think what I'm hearing the most complaints about is the second floor of Campbell.
Yep.
I think from what I understood, the other schools, I don't think that they were cool by any means, but the second floor Campbell got hot today is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so I went upstairs and I walked around the second floor. I talked with a few teachers who were still there. I walked into what I know are the warmer classrooms. The classrooms were in the low 80s, maybe 85 was what I saw there. And so that is, but again, that's That was also at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it's a little more sun at that point in time, but you're absolutely right. And, you know, the messaging has to be keeping the shades drawn, keeping the lights off. There are ways that our teachers are able to manage that. Keeping windows shut. Everybody wants to open the window to get the fresh air, but if the fresh air is 93, you're not helping yourself if it's cooler inside. So those little things that we just need to do to get through it, and then there'll be a cold front tomorrow afternoon, and we'll be on the other side of this. So, but right now, I'm not finding anybody who is doing anything in our region. There is at least one school in the Concord area that's dismissing early, but that's their local decision. So we'll keep monitoring health and safety and make sure that we're where we need to be. And then the last thing I have for you is your enrollment report. So remember that we did a snapshot in time on August 15th. We had 1178 at that point in time. And then Power School showed that on opening day, the 28th, we had 1176. Now, actually, 1111 is what showed up in the buildings. But remember that 39 of them were preschoolers who we weren't expecting yet. Preschoolers are coming back now. I believe we had a group yesterday and then another group came in today. So I think we're back up to where we need to be with preschoolers at this point. So you know, I had us at 1150 is our opening day number. And remember that our next count is actually this Friday. And that's because in that first week, we've already heard from some families that have moved, but it was kind of a last minute move. So we're still cleaning up our rosters to make sure that we have an accurate number. And then the final thing is the October 2nd number, which is a Monday. That's when we will capture what our enrollment is and use that to drive all of the budgeting decisions that we make for the year. So we're zeroing in on that day. But that's that is your start of the school year information on enrollment.
Any questions? Seeing none, moving on to business and operations. It is the first meeting of the month, which means there is an update versus the more thorough report comes at the second meeting of the month. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Totten, our business administrator, to give us an update.
So we luck out, we have a more thorough one. This
Well, then there we
two
go.
in a row. So this one, because this one kind of goes over July,
Okay.
which we had to wait a while for the audit to go through because we have to make adjusting entries that
Yeah.
impact both fiscal years. So we don't typically get numbers in July, but I mean, the more, the better in some ways. But first, Dr. Jetty talked quite a bit about the LMS renovation, so it's really skeleton crew there now. A lot of it is that commissioning work, making sure things are working right. I'm making sure if something's supposed to be insulated, it's insulated. If not, it becomes insulated. So we have our July invoice. Pretty soon we'll get our August invoice, which would be pretty much the last one, other than a tiny bit from North Branch after that. It'll also include kind of those ending change orders. So a lot more for that probably next school board meeting. Financial reports, so these are July. Next meeting, you'll have the August ones. A couple different things was last year for all the e-finance reports, we took out medical and dental. And after I thought about it for a while, I'm like, well, we don't need to take out medical and dental for the summary because the goal was to kind of protect those singleton teachers and kind of have some privacy for them. So this year, if it's a summary report, you'll see all the information. If it's a detailed, I have taken out medical and dental again, and I put that at the bottom. Also, you'll notice there's a tab for transfers because we are going to keep up with it every meeting. You guys will see the transfers as well as the transfers over 5,000. So I don't know if there's any questions on July.
On the North Branch and the remaining, right, I know we were tracking the retainage and the potential credit back to the district that was held for overage. How is that looking?
It is looking like we're going to have some credit back for something specific, which was when they came in to work on the gym ventilation. It is a older unit, but it was in a tough spot to replace. So the decision was to revamp that with made parts, new parts, and they gave an allowance for that, and that came under the allowance. So we'll get that back as credit. But as far as other credit back, it's not looking like much, if anything. Partly because they had to keep on running into their contingency. Again, the school district did not have a contingency. The construction manager, North Branch did have a contingency. But when, if for instance, warranty work is for them to come out on a Saturday, well, the North Branch person who arranged that, we still have to keep on paying that as well. So since the project went on longer, they didn't change their guaranteed maximum price, but they kept on eating into their contingency. So it's not looking like we're really gonna have any of their contingency left. And if their contingency was left, it would have gone back to the taxpayers. So there is a credit for the overhaul of the air handling unit in the gym, but due to kind of the length of the project, it ate into their contingency as.
And at one point, wasn't it, I'm going off memory, right? Wasn't it about $180,000 that we were tracking in that contingency fund? Do you recall? No?
No.
That's all right. That's all right.
Because again, we have less control over that, because it's not our contingency.
Right, but I remember I recall there being a very specific line item in the detailed budget reports that had that as a line item that we were tracking to.
We can go back and get that number, because it's on the original contract that would have produced the guaranteed maximum. They would have projected their contingency, but they also weren't projecting to have the project go on as long as it did. And so, general conditions, for example, ate into some of that contingency. And the other thing is that, they can predict, okay, we're gonna find some things. We get up above the ceiling, we're gonna find some things up there that we have to fix. They found, I think what I heard is they found more than they expected at Litchfield Middle School. So there were more things that needed to be, once they lay eyes on it and touch it, they have to fix it. And so those things also ate in the contingency at a higher rate than they anticipated.
So if you click on the July invoice,
Yeah.
it is lengthy, it's 75 pages.
Yep.
But if you go to page 2, item number 19, which is midway through, is construction manager's contingency. So they started with 332,581.
Yeah, okay.
But that kept on being eaten into for different reasons. Partly they came in and they did the locker room floors for the boys' locker room. North Branch wasn't happy with the work. They had the same company come out again. They still weren't happy with the work. So eventually, that work is two things are happening. Both the company's eating some of that cost of redoing that work, but eventually North Branch is eating some of the cost of redoing that work as well, because at the end of the day, they want to provide a product which is what Litchfield would expect. So that's where some of their contingency money is coming from as well. So, but you can see kind of where we were after July from.
Yeah, maybe that's the number we were tracking to at one point in time, being in the 180 range, because now I see it's this current 113.
Yeah, so at one point, we were more hopeful, but then I think anybody with a multi-million-dollar type of renovation, things keep on chipping away at what didn't work and what needed to be fixed.
Okay, so essentially what I'm hearing is there's no expectation of funds being returned back to the taxpayer on this.
That is correct, as of now. Yep,
From the project.
yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions
So,
on that? No, I'm gonna keep going.
so DOE 25 and MS 25, so you received the Excel portions of that. That has gone into the state. I haven't heard back any feedback. Again, I'm not expecting a lot of changes because it ties into the auditor's numbers, which is where we want to be. So auditor's numbers go to the dollar, ours goes to the penny, but it ties in, with their rounding from where they go. So with that, if there are any changes, I'll let you know. There is a sign that you guys signed that you are aware of both of the reports. And you'll notice that these were due September 1st. So the report went to the state before September 1st. talking to other business administrators, because of the way that school board meetings go in August, it's not always right towards the end. So they get their report in on time, and then they send in, and they get their data to the school board members on time, and then they send in the school board signature page after their first meeting in September. So as you looked at the DOE 25 or the MS 25, I don't know if you had any questions.
I
on
did,
that.
and this is one of the areas that I had added to the agenda. For DOE 25, I think the eye-opener for me was the cost per pupil at the very bottom of that, right? And now we're at 18,182 district-wide. Just wanted to confirm, that's accurate? That's what we're saying it costs to educate a child here in Litchfield?
Yep, and again, that is without transportation. And that's also taking away things like out-of-district placement, which is what you'd kind of expect. But that's cost without transportation.
Without transportation?
Yep.
Okay.
So that's a state requirement because we're 3 miles wide by 7 miles long, and Conval is like 30 miles wide by 70 miles long. So
Very different.
their cost is going to be much higher because they have to transport kids so much further. So the state always pulls transportation out, for example, because there's no way to keep that comparable. But to answer your question, it is accurate. That's what's in the report, and that's calculated back. And that's why, during budgeting, when you use like building level codes, you're tracking how much you're spending at the various levels, because that's the overall number I think you're citing, Andrew, but there's middle school, elementary, and high school number that differs, because that's all tracked through the budget process.
So if we compared it to last year, our total, which takes into consideration all our students at 3 buildings, was $17,645. This year, we are $18,183.
So what was the first number, 17,000?
$17,645.
Okay. And now 1,000, 18,000.
We're up $500 roughly, right?
So, and again, this report, I know it's quite lengthy too, so feel free to email me questions as you look into it a little bit more.
No, and I know it's not going to be a popular conversation to have, but I think it's a healthy conversation to have as a board. When I look at these costs and I look at $18,300 and we'll call it $30 for the high school, and I look at the likes of Pinkerton at 16 and change, and I look at the likes of Trinity at 16 and change, and BG in the 17 range, they're all in that ballpark. It's costing more for us to educate our high schoolers for what is reported as not a great educational experience.
What are you looking at, expenditures per pupil or tuition rates?
Expenditures per pupil, right?
But for the other schools, are you looking at what?
Oh, books and all
Tuition.
that, that's the admissions, right? That's what's reported. I'm going on what I see and on their websites.
Right.
So are there other costs? Yes.
Yeah, and I think some of the schools you mentioned are the larger costs, larger
Right.
schools,
Yeah,
so they're gonna be
efficiency
able to
scale.
take,
Spread the cost out.
a principal's salary, assistant principal's salary, and spread it out over many more people than we are. And, as the town of Litchfield sends its kids to school, one thing to remind is too, that if you walk down the halls of Litchfield, kids know each other, teachers know the kids. If you walk down the halls of other buildings, it's not the same feel. And I know that from my own experience working at different schools. So sometimes you pay a little bit more just because you don't spread it out amongst the same amount of people, but your students are much better known at schools like Litchfield than other places.
Yeah, and to compare data, the larger schools have the lowest per pupil expenditure. If you sorted it, you would say these are the large schools compared to the smaller schools. So there's absolutely, for what Doug is saying, there is that economy of scale that takes place.
And if you compared
I was
our,
gonna say, don't we have that data on our peer cohort?
Well, once this is done, once
Right.
we get, once all districts get their DOE 25 approved,
Yeah.
we can pull that peer cohort data and share it with the board.
I feel like we looked at it last year and.
We did look at
We were
it.
very much in the middle,
Yeah.
if not on the lower end.
Correct.
we're below
Amongst
state,
our,
and we're below state average.
right,
Amongst our peer cohort.
right. But I do think it brings up the conversation, and I'm gonna use this opportunity to say it. There does seem to be, and it's been talked about online, and it's been talked about in here, there do seem to be a fair amount of students that are parents in town that are electing to send their students not to the district and to other schools. Whether it's I'm more aware of it just because of who my friend group, or whether there's an actual higher number, and I think there was from 8th grade to 9th grade, there is that situation, and it kind of gets into the chicken or the egg situation for me, because that's less money that we're going to get from the state because we have less students, right? We don't have as many students. The parents are willing to pay that money for private school. At what point, I don't even know what I'm asking, but at what point, how does this impact the overall educational experience at CHS when parents are pulling their students out? And so how do we fix that when parents are leaving, or kids are leaving?
I think part of it is that we need to collect the information. So
Yeah.
why is that? I mean, I was asked that question when I was a principal and was losing students to Bishop Brady. And when I surveyed and found out, there were parents moving for ice hockey. They had it, we didn't. There were parents moving for, at the time, football. They had it, we didn't. So they were non-academic reasons. I don't think that's our scenario, but you don't know until you ask. And so we have to, I think, ask that question directly. And in some cases, we didn't even have, I think some were known earlier in the summer, but some were known later in the
Wasn't
summer.
there a flurry kind of at the end of the summer, or towards the end of the summer?
There was
all of a
more
sudden it was
towards
like
the
10 or
end,
12
yeah.
within the
I mean, I think we knew there was quite a few going to BG. A friend cohort, a group of friends from 8th grade. Yeah, group cohort going. But yeah, I do think there ended up being more than what was expected. Are we going to send out a survey?
I think we need to. I think,
Good. I think we should too.
we can make guesses, or we can hear what people are posting on social media or whatever. It's like,
Right.
we need to go directly to and say, what were the reasons? And in some case, we have to be careful, because we strongly advocate for parent rights.
Sure.
And so if we believe that, then they have the right to do this. And so that's the other piece is, there may not be a reason. There may just be, that's where we wanted to go to school.
Right, but there may be a reason, and we need to
Yeah.
fully
We need to
understand it.
ask,
Right.
but we have to understand the answer may be, because that's what I wanted to do, and
And that's okay, that's
that's
an
okay.
answer.
That's the answer,
I'm
right?
totally fine with that, and I think it is parents. It's their
Absolutely.
choice that they have the ability to do that, and they should. I think it just impacts the conversation we're having when we're talking about the per pupil expense, because we have less students in our building
I
right
mean,
now.
I'm gonna be very, very direct right now, right? I'm seeing these numbers and are we better off searching for an external high school to send our kids to that will give them what seemingly is a better educational experience in high school and save the taxpayers money?
So that's the part where you lose me, because I'm not sure that part happens. For us to send
It does,
our
'cause-
students out of district, I don't know that we're gonna
Well,
spend less than
We're paying
18,000.
18,300, right? That's here, right? And we're not gonna have essentially the costs of operating a high school in town.
Aren't
because-
those costs part of,
You're
Your
only,
people costs,
but it's
yeah.
all the operational costs of running a high school.
So the town of Derry spends $15,048 for every child to be educated at Pinkerton. That's 3,000 less, right? But you're also not gonna be in a class of 90. You're gonna be in a class of,
1,000?
well, they're at 3,000, add another 400 kids from us, right? So they're now gonna be in a much larger class, if they all went to Pinkerton, for example. It could be, any other school. And so then the question becomes the quality of education, back to Doug's point. We know our kids, their ability to participate in activities is, I think, enhanced, because we're a smaller school. So that provides opportunities, and the question, the challenge for the board, to me, is what's $3,000 worth?
It's more than that though, right? Because we're, I think, planning on going to the voters in March, likely asking for a new elementary school to be built for the cost of $40 million, something like that.
Yep.
What does that impact on this cost per pupil?
I don't think the building counts, right?
Building counts. Absolutely it does.
Let's get,
But I don't think it counts in that calculation.
I think it does,
let us get you that answer.
right? Because that's really gonna be our real number, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we gotta go further than that too, because as we talk about the 18,000, remember, the local taxpayers are paying for the majority of that, but last year, about 3,800 per kid and more for each special ed kid, and then more for each English language learner kid.
Sure.
Is provided by the state as well,
We'll
so
be getting more in the
we're
coming.
getting more. Yeah.
So what is that real number is what I'd like to get to, right? For next year, and as we go to potentially the voters in March, what is that real number that they can expect as a result of the new school? Right, because that's gonna be, I think, one of the key factors.
And then I think another thing to remember is that Litchfield is a smaller school. If you were going to be accepted into a high school, most likely it would be a much larger high school in a much larger town. And my experience is, New Hampshire is different than a lot of states. We're the local control. Like, you give up a lot of control over your students when you send them to a bigger high school, because they're taking it as tuition, and they'll listen, because I've seen them listen, but it's not the same as the town making decisions on what's right for their kids. And then you also don't have control over how the costs go up at those schools. So it's a lengthy, I think a very lengthy conversation, with numbers playing part of it, and then also just with people's kind of expectations for their kids and how they're going to be known and cared for at school playing another part of it.
I mean, I think it's subjective, right? What do you consider an optimal educational experience? What one might consider the best educational experience may have to do with test scores and whatnot, and what another might have, believe is an optimal educational experience might be class sizes, or might be,
School sizes,
atmosphere,
right.
or
Might-
ratios, or
Yeah,
relationships.
participation in sports.
Yeah.
If you go to a bigger school, the kids aren't making the varsity teams as much.
I don't completely disagree with the conversation coming up. I've heard it coming up in town as conversations go on. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't know that it's a conversation that should be blocked in any way. I think we just need to have a good answer for it. To me, there's a reason why Litchfield built Campbell 23 years ago. They did not want their students to be a part of Alverin anymore. They didn't want to send their students out. I wasn't around in town to know, you might have been, but I wasn't around in
It was my
town
first vote in Litchfield, actually.
to
was
know
the-
why and what went into that decision, but somewhere along the way, the town really felt it was important to educate high school students in-house, and I see the
The
importance of
town
that.
was, when we moved, that was sort of when we moved in, the town was growing very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and now when the Economic Development Committee even talked about this, that growth has sort of slowed, as far as population growth. It's a little bit behind where the projections were. And at that point, the kids were, I think, were going to Alverin and to West, depending on where you lived in town. If you lived on the north end of the town, you went to Manchester West. And if you lived the other end of town, you went to Alverin.
Well, that's before Albuquerque went through, right?
Oh, yes,
So
long before Albuquerque.
North-south was more distinct.
Yes.
Well, like I said, I think it's a healthy conversation to
It is.
have, right? And I think that the new school will absolutely play a factor into these numbers, right? And, yeah, I guess we'll see how it plays out, right? I hear you, the town voted for a high school, no doubt, and I think if and when, and it's a big if and when, right, this would ever come up to kind of survey the townspeople, would have to be through an advisory type of warrant article.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. At some point. I don't know that that's this year's
No,
conversation,
No, I don't
but
think it is.
Do you know how many kids go to Trinity?
I think that's years. It's not something that we can solve here tonight.
No, it's not, but I don't know. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that the cost per pupil numbers will easily go up $1,000 per student. All things considered, special education, the
student?
new school.
Well, 40 million, 50 million with interest spread out over
20 years.
some period of,
Yeah.
20 years times, divided by the number of kids, whatever that math is.
all right, I'm gonna move us on, if everyone's okay with that, to, I think, were there any more questions on the DOE 25 and the MS 25?
Yes, sorry. Do I need to sign this with blue ink? I see everybody using other than black ink, so. It doesn't say
I think it just
specifically.
says ink.
It just says ink. Is that okay with black ink, okay?
I signed one with green and one with blue.
I think it went through, with black ink. I know there was some
Can I borrow
question
blue
between
just to
blue
have us
and
covered?
not
I know
blue.
some of these forms are.
Very specific.
All right, so state adequate, state aid.
Yeah, so something we do have to make a decision sooner rather than later is state adequacy aid. So, two changes. One is good, and one is presenting to be not so good for Litchfield. So we'll start with the good. So the state has made immediate changes to adequacy aid. Which has increased our amount from what we were projecting it to be by 214,000. So that means that typically if you bring in 214,000 more in revenue, that tends to go back to the taxpayers. So with this one, though, there are two options. It can go back, it can be used to offset taxes. So again, it won't go back to individual taxpayers, but it can be used to offset taxes. And that's the default one. The other one is a different type of special meeting, a more streamlined special meeting, where you don't need to get a certain percentage of the residents there. It's just a simple majority. The only thing that's allowed to be talked about would be the use of this revenue and whether you're going to increase appropriations or do something like put it into a capital reserve fund. So it's a simple majority of the vote that counts, and people can amend the number up and down, but they can't adjust other numbers at that special meeting. So timing is the key issue, because again, this all goes into tax rate settings, which start at kind of the beginning of October. Doesn't mean that every town is being worked on at the beginning of October, because there's only so many people at the DRA. So it's really middle of October that if the decision was to have that special meeting, that we'd want to wrap that up so we would be able to tell DRA what we were doing with the money. So of that $214,000 increase, $189,000 of it could be used to increase appropriations. It has to do with, the difference has to do with the amount of kids that were projected to be in special ed or ELL and the amount of kids that actually are. So they identify for you, the state does, the amount that you could, if you chose to, look to increase appropriations. So part of that involves kind of, if the choice was to do that, the special meeting. Part of it involves consultation with the budget committee. And then eventually it becomes a simple majority of those present at that meeting.
The special meeting?
At the special meeting. And then again, the only other option for Litchfield is to have it go back to reduce taxes. The third option for some towns is that they have voted and it has been approved for them to be able to retain funds at the end of the year. Litchfield doesn't have that. So we have two options.
So applying the revenue as a credit during local tax rate settings, is that going to be done, meaning this October, in the next?
Yep.
Okay. It's not the year after.
It'd be this, yep.
My vote is no special meeting, option 2.
Part of the reason that Doug and I reached out to legal to make sure we understood the options is we were reflecting on last September's meeting.
Right.
So if you remember, the last time we had a special meeting, we put money in the reserve funds toward the elementary school project. We used those funds last September. And I heard from the public, you need to build that back up. We understand you have to do what you have to do, but getting those funds back restored is important to the community. So, our first gut reaction to it was, this is revenue for a tax reduction, less money to raise from people's pockets here in town because it's coming from the state. But then we thought, wait a minute, that September conversation, we have an obligation to make sure the board is mindful of that dialogue. You have to decide which route you want to go, but to not present this option, I think it would be wrong on our part, because clearly there were people on the floor saying, build that back up.
So what would the timeline be if we were to approve a special meeting? Are we past the,
And you need a deliberative, right?
right, are we past that deadline?
It's not a deliberative paper vote special meeting,
Oh,
right? So think back to the last time we did this. We had the $600,000 in additional revenue that came from the state.
yeah,
We have to post a meeting. We have to have whoever shows up in the auditorium
vote,
explain the question, and then people put their hands up and
Okay.
vote. So it's a,
yeah, I
it's
do
a,
remember that. We did that we put some money into that capital improvement.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So it's that process. So
So we have to have a special meeting 14 days prior to the voting, the actual meeting, and then 7 days prior to that, we have to notice about that first public hearing. Actually, about both of them.
But Gordon is suggesting that it really should be held in early October, which means you'd have to make a decision tonight if you wanted to go that route. And then we would have to follow the timeline that Doug has to post it properly and so forth. But Doug, can I just say that again? Because it's literally,
Decision tonight, or not necessarily tonight, but definitely before the next
Before the
board
20th.
meeting. Yeah.
My question, last year, or maybe it was the year before, we had that 200 and something thousand of additional revenue that came in, and I can't remember what source it came in from, but we elected not to
Do anything.
with it and to have it go back and be part of the offset to the taxpayers in the next tax year, which is what we just went through as we closed the books in June. Why is this gonna be happening so quickly and not wait a year?
so I thought that revenue, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that was a conversation at this time last year.
It was.
So that
And carryover.
200,000 was shown on our books.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to raise that in additional revenue from the town because we already have it.
Right.
So that was cleared out like last fall with tax rate setting.
But I thought we had
So,
returned it,
two-
we had earmarked it to return to
Yeah.
offset the tax rate for this year.
So two different sources of revenue.
Okay,
So
yeah,
that-
so that's what I'm confusing
Yeah,
then, so if you
yeah.
can
I
explain
am
this
too.
to me,
So
make it,
that
yeah.
revenue was a one-time tax reduction by the state that they were hoping to use as a one-time tax reduction. It had to do with a surplus, and what they did was, not too many years ago, the state used to put more towards teachers' percentage of their teacher retirement, and they started putting like very little money, and then the towns had to kind of keep picking that up. So they chose a certain percent, and that amount of money went back. And the goal of the state was to reduce taxes. And they said, we want you to either reduce taxes this year or next year, and if you really want to, you can have a special meeting and you can appropriate it for more. But what we're asking you to do is reduce taxes. So we chose to, because we didn't know what was going to be happening financially last year, let's reduce taxes, let's bump it by a year, let's make sure we have something to reduce taxes by the following year.
Okay.
So that's what we did. This is a change in adequacy aid. So
Okay.
two completely different things. One was a one-time change.
Yeah.
This is now this change will keep going forward, and what it's actually gonna do is, each of those numbers are gonna bump up by 2% each year.
Okay.
So if this changed it to, I don't know if it was like 4,100 per student, then it'll be 4,100 times 1.02 for the next year type of thing. So this increase is consistent moving forward.
But it's still money we weren't counting on.
Huh?
It's still money we were not counting on.
It is still money that we were not counting on.
This year, but next year, we know the formula.
We know the formula, but that gets us to
Budgeting.
change number 2, which will impact us in the negative next year. Oh, not next year, in 2026. So, but two different ways
Okay,
that
so
funding
two
came.
different ways to do it, but there is no option of holding it for a year that there was with that one-time payout. We have to either have it go back to offset taxes now,
Yeah.
or have a special meeting.
So
Those are the two options.
Those are the two options. The only towns that could, in a way, find a way to hold it for a year are the towns that voted to be able to retain money. So they could, they are allowed to set it aside and then have it be used against their next tax rate setting.
So I'm struggling with this, I'm just gonna be honest, I'm struggling with this a little bit, because I do feel like we gave the district made a really big effort to give a healthy balance back to the taxpayers this most recent year, right? In June.
473,
Right, the 473.
442, sorry.
442, which was, except for COVID, more than the last 5 years, right?
Yes.
But I also see this as being additional income we were not counting on, and to me, that's the type of income that should go back to the taxpayers.
Is this linked at all to increased numbers in special education?
A little bit,
A
but
little
it's
bit,
more the change in their multiplying number.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure
More
that.
change in the formula.
More change in the formula.
I just
Yep.
wanted to make sure that we're covered, you know, with the increases that we've seen, or the additional students coming in, that we have enough in this year's budget to cover those expenses.
Yeah, and I think we're lucky with how we were able to staff the teachers for special education. I think our shortfall is, again, the assistants, the paras who play a vital role that we're not having anybody apply. So, when we have the money to hire them too, so.
Right.
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve option 2 to return the $189,739 to the taxpayers.
Second.
Double second. Any other questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor of returning the 189,739,000 to the taxpayers,
Well,
by-
actually,
by
it will be
doing
the
nothing.
214 in a way.
Oh, okay, well,
Actually, it could be the 189. I'm not, I need to clarify that, but the amount
whatever the
that.
surplus is,
So I need to amend my motion?
Just
No,
take the
I
dollar
wouldn't.
amount out
Just
of it.
take the dollar
and
amount
say
out.
The
I'll amend my
additional,
motion, right, to be the return of the state aid
In excess than was projected.
in excess of what has been projected to the taxpayers.
does the second agree with the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, you seconded too, but I'm just giving it to her. Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, that passes 400, so that money will be returned during local tax rate setting.
And does that affect this upcoming budget year?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, this tax when you get your bill in December. Yep.
Can't wait.
So that is the good.
Like 5 cents off.
Now the bad.
The tough part is they've made changes to what used to be called the stabilization grant is now called the hold harmless grant, but they're planning on phasing that out over 20% every other year, starting in 2026. So 20% cut in 2026, another 20% cut in 2028, followed every 2 years from that point until it goes down to zero. So if you go up and you see the table, you can see of our adequacy for our total, a decent percentage of that does come from what used to be the stabilization grant. So back in 2012 was another time when the state made major changes to their adequacy. And what the state does is they never surprise somebody the next year. So they said, okay, you
Well, that's
thought you
not
were
true.
getting this, and now we're giving you this with our new formula. We're gonna give you the difference. And so Litchfield has been kind of holding on to that difference ever since then. My understanding is that difference for Litchfield and for other towns, the state has tried to remove that before, and there's been pressure, and they haven't done it. So now we have another instance of the state saying we're gonna remove it starting in 2026. We're a couple of years away from that, so I don't know if there's gonna be pressure, and they might not remove it again, or they might not be as aggressive in how they remove it, but right now, we have to go by what they tell us. Again, no impact this year, no impact next year, but as we look at 2026, we would be expecting 410,000 less in revenue than we received going into next year. So something that we want to kind of plan for, but then also make sure that if there is somebody involved with state politics, that we are letting them know that that money would be definitely helpful for Litchfield, and that we would like it to continue. So hopefully there'll be enough pressure for that to continue, because again, as we look at that 18,500, I'm not gonna get too political here, and we look at the state paying about 4,000, there's a big difference that the local taxpayers have to cover. And in a town like Litchfield, where there is mainly residents and not so much of your commercial buildings, it's it's the people who, some people who lived on fixed incomes and some people who don't. So it goes to them in a disproportionate amount than it does in other towns who have the commercial base. So any amount that Litchfield can hold on to is going to be beneficial for everyone.
So write your representatives.
Yep. All right, so,
Invite him in here to talk.
We just need to remember that for the,
Yep.
not this year's budget, next year's budget.
Yeah.
yep.
Right? Okay.
So that's pretty much what I have for tonight.
Okay.
What's the bus practice?
Oh, so the bus practice is just, so starting several years ago, there were some after-school programs for GMS that were right over the Litchfield line that asked for us to take their students from GMS to those locations. And the thought of the board, as my understanding at that time, was, for working families, there's only so many options for your kids after school. So there's a program at GMS, which is definitely helpful, but that might not meet every kid. And so if it's right over the line, why not provide that service? So I put that in there because there was a third place that asked, who luckily was right beside the two other places. So it made it easy. But we continued that practice, but we wanted the board to be aware that that is what we have done again this time, in case moving forward, if there was
So we had 2 and now there's 3.
we had 2 and now there's 3.
Okay. That wasn't clear in this.
They're all right next to each other.
They're all right next to each other, and it's only for GMS. And one of the main reasons it's for GMS is just the order of buses. Like LMS and high school buses go first, and then they have to get to GMS, and they're already sometimes a little bit late. So if we made the LMS and high school buses later, then the people at GMS would be waiting. So we can do it for GMS because it's the last route, but we can't do it for LMS and
Probably
CHS.
where the most need is for an after-school
And it's also where the
program
most need is as well, to help out those parents.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you for that update. Any other questions for Mr. Totten from the board?
Nope.
Seeing none, we'll move on to public minutes. I'll make a motion to approve the August 16th, 2023 public minutes.
Second.
First and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing,
I had sent change
okay,
there today.
see if it's on. She's usually pretty quick, so I'm wondering if it got fixed already.
Still struggling with the whole Google Mail thing.
Do you remember where it was?
It was in the conversation about the opinion of, I'd asked for a copy of the letter from
Okay, so up
Morgan
under,
Hollis.
yeah, draft warrant.
And then of course was denied. Dr. Jetty sent you a copy of the letter.
So what was the change you were looking for?
That I had requested a copy of it and my request was denied.
It says Mr. Plansky asked for the information that was shared with Ms. Ames. Dr. Jetty, is that a change from what it was?
Nope, that's what I asked for.
Was the request denied at the
what-
meeting or was it denied after?
It was denied at the meeting.
I don't know which page are we on? I'm in the general area, but I'm not sure what,
It's above the meeting calendar chart.
meeting calendar.
You
Yep.
see the meeting chart? There's a extra space between the paragraph. If you go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs, Mr. Plansky asked for the information that was shared. So I'm sorry, did Ms. Sullivan make the change that you requested? So this now
I don't
reflects
know.
what you believe accurately happened, or? So I'm comfortable with the minutes as they're written. They jive with my memory of what we talked about.
They do for me as well. However, I'm glad to table them if
I'll find it.
Mr.
I'm
Plansky
in the
wants
right
more
place
time to
now.
look at it. We could approve it at our next meeting.
It does look like it's in there. Does look like it's in there.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the minutes as drafted currently?
No, it's not, and the change wasn't made.
Okay, so do you want us to table this to pursue that? Do you want to make a motion, or are you comfortable with the minutes as drafted?
No, I would like it in there, in the
Okay,
minutes.
so I'll make a motion to table it into our next meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor of tabling the minutes to the next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we are tabling those minutes.
Just so we know, so what's gonna happen between now and the next meeting?
There has to be an edit to the minutes by Mr. Plansky.
A request to
A
edit the
request to
minutes.
edit to minutes by Mr. Plansky. Once that's sorted, then the board will re-review and approve.
So the request goes to Jan, the minute
minute-
taker.
That's right.
And she'll review it, do it or not do it, would be my guess, and
Usually,
then,
don't we just make an amendment here?
that's why I'm asking the
Yeah.
question.
Do you?
I don't know what the amendment is, though. That's
Or
the
what-
thing.
Right.
That's where I'm
Right,
struggling.
but if, Peter, if you want to change the language, we can do that now.
Or if you need more time to figure out what that language change is.
Or
That's
go back and watch the
that-
video.
That's okay.
I had sent her what I said, I had requested a copy of the letter that Heidi saw from Morgan Hollis about the demand to be paid now. And Dr. Jetty wouldn't give it to me. And that's all I wanted, and I sent it to her, and I'll find it, and I don't wanna take up all the time here, but I can make the change,
So,
send it back out.
so it's tabled, so at this point, we'll just discuss it at the next meeting, whatever change you're looking for, send
that
around to
language
the
right.
board, and then we can, that'll give us time to look back at the video as well if we need to be able to verify what was said or not said. Perfect, moving on to old business, the land purchase update / selection of a civil engineer, as recommended by facilities. So I'm gonna turn that over to you.
Oh, sorry.
To you?
Yep, to me. On August 23rd, we had a meeting of the Capital Improvement Committee.
Facilities?
No, Facilities
Facilities
Committee,
Improvement,
sorry. And we did a walkthrough of LMS. A subcommittee had met previously to meet with the 3 respondents of our RFP for the civil engineers for the new land. And the subcommittee had made a recommendation to the Facilities Committee, which the Facilities Committee approved and wanted to make a recommendation to the school board to go ahead and hire that. The firm that we, do we have, I'm sorry, I'm not ready for this update, so, go ahead. Can you,
Yes, I'm sorry. So
Sorry.
that's quite okay.
Yeah.
So basically, we sent out a request for proposals to be the civil engineer for the project. We heard from, actually, we direct solicited, I believe it was 6 civil engineering companies, and we had 4 who expressed an interest, and then ultimately we selected 2 to come in for interviews. The folks that were on the interview committee were Doug, myself, Dave Ely, and Kyle Barker, who are the
I
owner's
was there
rep
too.
and the architect of record. And so we interviewed the firms, and then we selected who we thought was the best firm. And I'm sorry, Tina, you were in those too. What am
I
I
was in
thinking?
those too,
You
yeah.
you sat in on the interviews.
did.
And so then Tina brought forward to the Facility Improvement Committee the recommendation from our group, which was unanimous to recommend the hiring of Keach and Nordstrom.
Thank you. I could not remember
And-
their name, sorry.
So we made that recommendation, and the committee, so I had to step out, so I missed a vote at the committee level. So
Yeah,
can you just
committee
tell us
voted
about?
unanimously to recommend Keach and Nordstrom to the board.
Perfect. And so the recommendation to the full board tonight is to hire Keach and Nordstrom as the civil engineers for the Griffin,
studies.
or the Robin Riley Memorial, or elementary school.
What are the dollars associated to this?
We don't have a contract yet, right? So we would
Nope, we do.
authorize you-
They gave us a dollar amount. It was within the budget that the board had set. So if you remember, you authorized us to,
25,000.
yep, you gave
Will
us a
the
budget.
board be able to see the contract before we motion this?
Yeah, we don't have a contract yet from them,
We have the
so
proposal.
we would,
Oh, I thought I just heard there was a contract.
there was a proposal.
Okay.
And so then it would have to be reduced to an actual contract. But the dollar amount,
92,000.
92, I believe, 94, and
Yeah,
they,
95, somewhere around 95,000.
but they were very, so that's exactly where it's gonna land. I mean,
Would that be able to be shared with the board so we can take a look at the proposal and what we're getting for that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we don't have to vote on this tonight, right? Can we wait until next board meeting after we take a look at the contract or the proposal?
Yep, we can definitely hold off.
But should we authorize you to work out a contract with Keach and Nordstrom? I think that's what we've done in the past. We've authorized you
I'd like
and
to see
Doug
the
to work.
proposal first. I
Right,
don't want to authorize a contract without seeing a proposal.
Well, I think I mean,
that's not how we've done it.
we
in the
shared that with the Facilities Improvement Committee, correct? They
Yeah.
had access to all of that information. And so they made that recommendation forward, but we could certainly get it. As Tina's saying, historically, when the committee makes that recommendation, that's been the recommendation. They do that groundwork, but we can certainly get it to you.
Yeah, I don't know any different, and I would just like to see and educate myself on the proposal and what we're
I'm
getting.
with you.
Yep,
That's fine. We can just give access to that file.
yeah, absolutely.
It's fine. But I would like to make a motion to authorize Dr. Jetty and Mr. Totten to work out a contract.
Thought we had a
To
bid.
work out the drafting of a contract?
Work out the drafting of a
But
contract.
we're not gonna sign yet until the board
Right.
approves.
Right. But I think the time is of the essence because the work would need to, we put out that the work needs to be completed by November 1st so that we know what we have
find it.
at
It's
the
so
site that we're
enclosed
working with before we, go in full force campaigning for the new school, so.
Well, we haven't resolved the land issue yet either, right?
Right.
So why are we pushing for November 1st,
That's been the timeline from before.
right?
I mean, the situation with the land is a relatively new update. So I think the goal, the timeline that we had set out based off of the March warrant article was to follow this, and the hopes is that we'll still do that, but, we need to have those
I think we
conversations.
should work on the contract, but I certainly wouldn't have them do any work until we have the approval.
Agreed.
So we have a new deal worked out on the
Yep.
land.
Who signs the contract? Is it the board authorizing the signature, or is it the superintendent?
Superintendent.
And do you have the authority to do that without board approval to do that?
So to work out a contract to bring forward for a vote, I think
Yeah, I do.
That's-
Yeah, but I mean, to actually sign it without the board vote.
no, I would not sign
Right.
anything until there was a board vote authorizing
Just authorizing
that
them to work
contract.
out a contract.
But, I don't want to ask Keach and Nordstrom to now do another piece if we're not going to support that, right? Because they put the contract together, they bring it forward, and then we say, oh, whoops, hang on. So to me, it's a timing piece that the Facilities Committee has supported them as the best firm to use.
And I don't know anything about that industry, so I don't have anything to say if they're good or bad, right? All I'm saying is I'd like to be a little bit more educated,
Yeah.
right? So it sounds like the proposal can be shared, and that's great.
Yeah, I'll share it out. So the total combined actually was 92,500. And I'll share out their proposal, which details the work that they would do and as well as their past work.
They were by far the most thorough, and they also were committed to completing the work on time.
Cool. Before it snows,
Where that was different, right, well, that's part of it, yeah.
if it snows.
Where that might not have been the case with some of the other.
Okay, so we'll circulate around that proposal and then we'll have a definite vote on this at the next meeting. So if we can make sure that this is on the agenda under old business for the next meeting. I think the other piece of the land purchase update, is.
Well, so there was a motion and a second, right? To
There was a
authorize-
motion to authorize, I don't think there was a second, because I think we were still trying to figure out, are we authorizing the contract, or, I don't know that we need to motion to authorize, I think we can, the superintendent's free to negotiate a contract, he's not free to sign it without
Perfect.
board approval. So I think to the extent that you wish to pursue any conversation with them to put a contract together, I don't have any issue with that, I think we've had that before, right?
No, I think the board has authorized him to work on the contract. That's what we did with the architect and every other piece on the way. Am I right, Mike?
Yes, because if you're a busy civil engineering firm that's trying to get everything
Right.
done before snow flies, you want to know that that this is work, that this is actual work that's going to be awarded, versus, hey, put it together in a contract, I'll take it to the board. I mean, that's why they met with the committee and why the committee recommended to facilities. But again, we can take that step, but it is going to put a 2-week delay, and it's going to, if I'm Keisha Nordstrom, I'm just looking at, is Litchfield serious about getting this accomplished? That's
Well,
all.
I think Litchfield's serious. I think that we just want to have all the information at hand. So I think we can get it, if we get it before the next meeting, we can review it and we can vote it on the next meeting.
That works.
Okay, I'm good with that. So moving on, just a further update on the land purchase, can you, well, I guess I can advise, we do have to have further conversations in non-public, related to legal conversations that have been happening, that we cannot disclose at this time. However, we have, indicated to the town that we are suspending the timeline that was set forth for the special election, because, we're not sure we need that to follow that timeline right now. We're not sure we will need a special election. The hope is that we will not. And so, at this point, we've advised the town that we are suspending that timeline, and to the extent that we need to reinitiate it, we can vote to do that after we have our conversation in non-public tonight. So that's just the public update on that situation. Did I miss anything, Mike?
Nope, I think that's accurate. Thank you.
Okay. And then community forum planning for September 27th.
So, we have that on our calendar. The conversations that we have had with the GMS progress group is to have the community forum at GMS, to make it an opportunity for the community to come in and to walk around the building, to have the experience that we provided to our teachers so that they can really see what the classrooms are like. Jess Sabona, who is now part of the group, has commented on really the power of GMS teachers talking about what they're asked to do on a daily basis in the building. And so that's kind of the thought process and the planning at this point. But these are board community forums, so I need guidance on what you need us to do versus what board members are going to do, and exactly, how much of the forum will be a give and take conversation versus, us showcasing the facility, so.
I think too, it's an important time to include in that conversation what the future plans for the GMS site would be and what the community would like to see. And we haven't opened up that discussion yet, and I think that is a big piece of the pie
I think it's certainly an important piece that people in town are interested in hearing about, and that could influence votes. in a particular direction.
Is there a plan for the GMS site, or is
No,
it
I think
something
we want to hear,
need
what do
develop?
people want? What does the town want to do with it? I mean, I've heard everything from turning it into a rec center, to selling it, to bulldoze it, to, I don't know, continue to have it be a functional space, I don't know.
More of an open forum for.
So it's an information gathering?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think the goal of the community forums when we initially set them was to be information gathering for whatever the topic was, right? Either education on our part to, in terms of
Right.
engaging with the community, hopefully, you know, having some dialogue back and forth about a particular topic, and this topic is the GMS, and I think that dialogue doesn't necessarily need to be verbal when it comes to GMS. I think the building speaks for itself pretty well, in the condition it's in, and so touring that and giving the community a chance to see it, I think will be an important piece of it, but then maybe having a half hour set aside to be able to hear public feedback, either on what's gonna happen, what they would like to see happen to the space, or thoughts moving forward. I don't know, what other feedback are we still looking to gather? Is there anything else that we need feedback on?
Everything, right?
But I mean, related to GMS.
How do we get the message out to the 55+ communities so they can attend?
I think we ask cable to have a banner and announcement that they can put on the.
Yeah, somebody's gonna
cable
have to go
news
there.
and-
Can we
Go
do
there
some
and put it on their-
flyers?
put
Can
on
we
their-
put on a bulletin board?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, is it, that'll,
There's an association head at each one of those places.
That's right.
You can have a conversation with each
Yeah.
one of them,
Yeah.
somebody from the board, or
yep, I'm happy to do that.
Right, let's start to get that message out, right? That we're having these community sessions and they should feel welcome to
Right.
attend.
We want to hear their feedback,
Absolutely.
right? Does that give you direction for the planning purpose of it?
It does. Who's getting the info out though?
I'm happy to contact the 55+ community. I mean, that's fine. I think we need to come up with a
Let's
flyer.
come up with a flyer and drive it around,
Contact
right, to
information for
9 or
those-
10
for
of
the-
communities.
I have one, at Stage Crossing that I've had contact with, but when I asked, you know, again, this was years ago, but when I asked,
at LMS Stage Crossing.
CH, yeah.
Yeah,
one
behind the
right-
library.
Behind the library,
Yes.
yeah. That's the one we went to visit.
Yep.
So I don't know how to find out that information.
At the very least, I feel like the buildings have bulletin boards in their main rooms, right?
I would, yeah. I
And their
would think so.
mailbox centers, right?
Yeah,
There's
so I
definitely
mean,
a
I
way to
feel like we
tape up
can.
a flyer or
Yeah,
something.
I mean,
Pin a flyer or something.
at the very least, without any specific contact, I feel like we can do that.
Yes.
Well, do we want somebody to reach out to whoever the head of the association at those places is?
If we know who they are, that's
That's
great.
Well, I'm sure we
That's
can
the
find it out. You know, I'll try, I can find it out, I bet.
Okay, thank you.
So if it would help the board, Kayla's really good at like graphic, pretty things, so let
Good.
us,
Can she do the flyer?
let us develop a flyer.
'Cause I'm not.
I'm gonna put on it basic facts, the time, you know, what do we
Topics
think,
of
5:30 to 7:30? I mean, what time frame would you give?
I would start later,
6:30.
It's usually when we have evening events as a district, it's 6:30.
6:30?
I think even 6:30 to 7:30. 6:30 can be an open tour with different groups leading off at different, you know, every 5 minutes or so to tour the building really quickly, and then the conversation piece can start at 7
Yep.
In the gym?
in the gym
In
with
the
some
gym.
chairs set up.
So I'm gonna put 6:30 to 8.
Yeah, I think
Because
Yeah,
It's gonna
that's
go
fine.
longer.
Yep.
if you're looking at the tour, and then there'll be some presentation, this is where we are and how we got to where we are. And then one of the big questions that we need people to comment on tonight is that,
Yeah.
but also, and what will we do with this building?
Right.
What do you
What are your
envision for
thoughts?
this property when a new school is approved? Okay, we'll put all that out there. Thank you.
Sounds great. All right, moving into, anything else on that? Okay. Moving into new business.
Oh, you forgot your capital improvement.
Oh, you're right. I had those written down. All right, capital improvement plan.
So capital improvement plan, quick update. The capital improvement plan now is kind of hot and heavy in the review and preparation cycles of the refreshed 6-year plan. The school district is scheduled to present our plan tomorrow.
September 7th. I understand, Mr. Totten, you're going to be joining me at that meeting?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the light bulb kind of clicked at our last meeting, and as we're going out to 2029 now, which is crazy to think about, but I thought about 2029 also being the year of the balloon payment for solar. That is also due, and if it's the board intention to include that within the CIP plan, so we can be thinking about it and tracking it. Because what's the amount of the balloon payment? Were you able to confirm?
So it's estimated to be 545,000.
Right, which
So
well
estimate.
exceeds the threshold of anything in the CIP, right?
Yeah.
So,
So the question comes down to the timing of it, because the balloon payment comes at the end of the 6th year, and the start of the first year happens as of right now with substantial completion of the project, which would mean that both the solar and the storage is working in a way which benefits the school, because again, the storage is supposed to take away those demand charges as well. So right now, we have the solar, a better understanding when the solar is going to hopefully come online, and when the permits are going to be in place for that, or at least presented to the town in that. So that should be, the goal is sometime this fall. The storage probably won't be until, what's the most recent one? The winter?
No, I
Winter
think
into the
it's
spring?
I think, yeah, late winter, early
So
spring.
I think it was November for it to come online, is that right?
For
The solar. to
the
come
solar, yep.
So it's at the completion of both components, the solar and the battery storage?
So that's the way the current
Okay,
PPA is written.
so that would be 2030.
So that would be 2030. So there is talk about an addendum to the PPA, but I don't think that would necessarily move that date more forward. It might move forward how we're paying this year. Because again, the goal was that the taxpayers, one of the benefits of this was stable payments.
Yep.
So one of the goals is maybe to get to that quicker, but that would be an addendum, and that hasn't been worked out yet. But I don't know if that would change the ending, which again would be after the storage is there. So I think it's a good thing to talk over, because it's definitely well above the amount, and it's definitely something that we need to plan for. It's just that timing, whether it's 2029 or,
I think we add it to 2029, and we can always bump it if,
Yeah.
right, at least it's in the plan and we're tracking it, right, as opposed to
Do we
not
wanna-
being in the plan.
Do we want to divide it up and say that we're going to, put money into the reserve fund to,
Well, we would need to ask
Out
the
of
voters for a
underspend.
reserve fund to do that, right?
or to allocate money at the end of the year?
But again, that has to go to warrant.
Right, right. But if we're talking about what's included in the CIP plan,
Yeah, so I think what you're saying
It's gonna be
is-
this much in 2029,
yeah, do we start chipping away now
100,000
at
each year?
it? Because the CIP plan starts with, what we're gonna do this year, next year, and the
Right,
following years type of
right.
thing. So when do we want to start chipping away
Right.
at it?
We need a plan for it, right? And the idea is let's include it in the CIP plan. And, I think chipping away at it from a budget perspective makes a ton of sense. And I know that is generally the recommendation of the budget committee.
Right, but
Right.
in the past, in the CIP plan, we're gonna put 125,000 into this reserve fund for this project. We're gonna do this. So
And I
that's what I was
think-
But I
asking.
think the difference is we have the reserve accounts already set up to do that.
Right, couldn't
This
it go
we
in?
don't.
but
Right,
couldn't
we
it-
should set up a separate account that is
But
specific
this,
to
we
this.
don't have that account.
expenditure.
So couldn't we I'm literally looking at the CIP plan, say in March of 25, establish
Yeah,
whatever this fund is that we're talking about,
Yeah.
and then the 3 years after it,
Yes.
put 200,000 in it, or
That we can do.
150,000.
right.
Okay, and so then my next question would be, is it fall under a priority item, or is it an urgent or
At
necessary?
this point, it's
Urgent.
necessary.
I agree, but necessary falls below
Urgent.
urgent and priority.
Well, I mean, the urgent and the priority are the other pressing items that are within the town, I would think. It's not
But
something
this is a
that-
known cost, so I think it has to be ranked at the top.
That's the struggle. Like, I don't look at any of these other items as being something we've already contracted to. This has to happen whether we want it to happen or not. It's just a matter of how it's funded, right? And so that's why I'm not sure where it would go, whether it be under the GMS and be another urgent, or or a top priority, or whether it would fall
And just to back up a little bit, it doesn't have to happen. We can keep on paying the.
That's right.
I think that it bumps up in payment per year at that
Okay.
time, or we can
Okay.
exercise the right to pay.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Have
make
to
that
do
balloon
it,
payment.
but I think we
Okay.
want to.
Oh,
That's
100
our,
it makes
Yeah.
a ton of financial sense to do it.
we should.
right?
Yep, we should.
So then I would put it, if not urgent, then priority. What is, you have it open, I don't.
Yeah.
District-wide capital repairs, I mean, can it go, should
Is
it
the
go above that
594
one?
above and beyond the regular year?
Well, it's not a capital
Or
repair.
is it just
No,
the
ab-
delta?
Oh,
between
above
the-
it?
Saying
It's number,
inserted.
that's number 6,
Yeah.
so should it be the new number 6
Of
and move?
95. That's fine. And then in year
Okay.
6, you buy it for the 595. But then you own it. There's no payment beyond that.
So I think the idea is we're adding a row in between rows 5 and 6. Right?
Between rows 5 and 6.
Right, and the solar balloon payment will be the new number 6. Sounds like the will of the board's priority, which is fine. Way. And then it will be, what, $120,000 a year, planned for 25,
5.
2026, 2027, 2028, 2029?
So we could start, if it's 120, that's
600,000.
600,000,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, starting which year?
2025.
so
March
establish
of
the fund.
2025. And you-
Yeah.
and your
Establish
dollar
the
amount, you
fund.
said was
120.
120. I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
We'll clean it up and add a link in explaining it, because we have to develop the sheet. that goes
Yeah,
with
we
it.
gotta get that over to Ms. Kleiner as well.
Okay,
So
so
it's
do,
reflected in the CIP portal for tomorrow.
Yep.
so we need to vote on this right now, just to ensure that we have board support
I will
for
make a
this new-
motion I will make a motion to add the solar balloon payment as, on the school board, on the school district CIP plan as a priority. The amount of that will be $120,000 a year for 5 years, starting in the year 2025 through 2029.
And I will say okay, I will second your motion. And then looking at it, we don't even have 2029 on our,
That's, we've gotta add the year to it.
Right.
Because it's a 6-year plan now.
yeah, so we need to add a year as well. So I'm seconding your motion. Any questions or comments on that? Nope. Seeing none, all in favor of adding the solar balloon payment as number 6, priority item on the school district CIP plan, starting with March 2025, of $120,000 payments for the next 5 years. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, so that is the new plan, and we can clean that up. Mike?
Thank the board for having that be an agenda item tonight in preparation for tomorrow.
I'm struggling with, it's not acting the way I thought it would. So we're adding March of 2029 as the.
We need to add an under column O, we need to add a March 2029.
Which is for the 29-30
Yes.
budget year. Okay,
Correct.
So we also, there's, ended up with 2 versions of this too.
I know.
So you're doing the version that's not linked.
I have the version from July 12th in the CIP portal.
Perfect, then I can save this as the 9/6 update and we'll link it.
Okay.
We gotta be careful on linking it though, because
Right.
it was a settings that.
I know.
we can-
All right, well, I'm gonna keep us moving. Peter, you wanted to provide an update on the Economic Development Committee.
So the Economic Development Committee really spent a lot of time just going through some of the chapters of the previous Economic Development Plan, which I think was 2017. Really sort of setting an idea of what we can do to bring businesses into town, right? If the town grows to, I think, 10,300, I believe was the number they thought it could grow to, we would need some help financially. So right now, the next step, I think, is to look at what is available for land in town that can be used for, that is zoned for business and is actually buildable. And then that'll be discussed at the next meeting. Ms. Kleiner is going to try to figure that information out. And then talk about what kind of businesses we want to attract into town.
Okay.
We're sort of limited because we have 2 roads in, one road in and 1 road out of Litchfield, so, but if the town grows to its full size, the tax burden's gonna be very difficult for everybody.
All right, any questions for Peter?
No, thank you
Thanks
for
for
the update.
going, I appreciate it. All right, it is now 8:04, so we are going to go ahead to our second community input of the night, which can be on any topic. So if anyone is here to provide community input, you are certainly welcome to do so right now before we move on to our next agenda item. And I will move forward with closing community input. Thank you so much for your input, everybody. Just kidding. All right, so moving on to new business. In a bittersweet moment, I'm sure everyone's noticed, there's only 4 of us sitting here tonight. Since the last meeting, Liz McDonald has resigned from the board, but for a good cause. She hasn't deserted the district. She is actually just working in a different role in the district as a special educator at CHS, and which was definitely needed. And so we're sad to lose her on the board, but we're grateful that she'll continue to serve the district in a different manner. But that leaves an opening on the board. And so from the research that I've done from talking to prior chairs that have been around when there has been vacancies, and talking with Dr. Jetty and folks on the board, I think what I'd like to propose and get board consensus on for tonight is the procedure going forward. My proposal would be that starting tomorrow, I open a Google form for anyone in town who is interested in serving and filling this position for the remainder of, it's approximately 6 months until March. Could fill out the Google form, which will simply be, name, address information, as well as why you are interested in serving in the position, and then have that be closed next Friday. So it's open for about a week, and then have those that are interested come to our September 20th meeting, which is the Wednesday, and talk with us and answer questions from the board. Answer my question, why do you want to do this, which is going to be on their Google form, but sort of answer any questions that the board may have, and then the board can have a discussion and decide who they would like to see, who they feel like would be the best fit for that position. Are there any concerns about that process? Are there any suggestions? Is there any?
Will there be a reach out to those that ran this past year, just to make them aware of the open position?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We've already had 3 people who have sent in emails or contacted me indicating interest in the board position, and I've advised them that this is roughly what I think the procedure was going to be. So I will also reach out to those 3 to make sure that they know, and they should apply or should put their name in at least, so that we can have that conversation. It's not an application process necessarily.
And once the survey closes, I'm looking at your calendar. Is that right?
Yeah.
Once the survey closes on the 15th,
Yep.
Will the board receive that in advance of our meeting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I will, and in fact, I might even just have it be open so that you see it as they come in, as viewers or whatnot.
And that's for discussion on the 20th?
For discussion on the 20th. So I would like to get the position filled as soon as possible. We have LEA negotiations that we're gonna be starting on Monday. And we have obviously the GMS, land purchase, and then the building of potentially the Robin Riley Elementary School. We have lots of other things that we need to do. School's weekend. I mean, we gotta hit the ground running, and we need to get someone in that position. And the other piece of that, and I think is on the 20th, once we have that 5th person, we can elect a vice chair. I would rather do it once we have all 5 members of our board, rather than necessarily doing it tonight. I don't know how the board feels about that, but I think we can wait until the 20th when we have a full board. So that's the process. If everybody, I don't think we need to vote on it, but I just wanted to make sure we were all in consensus on it, or.
Yep. With the opening, though, there's a number of open committees that
Yep.
Ms. McDonald was a part of.
Yep.
Are we waiting on those too?
So the good news is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Ms. Widman indicated that PERC wasn't meeting until October 10th, so we'll have time to fill that position for PERC, and then, so we're not gonna miss a meeting then. I don't believe there's a joint loss.
There's one at like somewhere around September 21st, maybe.
Okay, so I can cover that.
And then Energy Committee? That's the Town Energy Committee.
Yeah, is anyone else able to do that? I can cover joint loss. That's in September. I don't know anything about energy. That's new, right?
It is, yeah, it's to do this whole buying by, as a town, their power.
Yeah.
I
Does
can't-
anyone know when the next meeting is for that? Have we heard anything more about that? All right, well, I'll reach out to the town and see if I can find out when the meeting is, and I'll circulate it to the four of you, and whoever is able to attend will attend. If we have to miss one, we have to miss one. We'll do the best we can. Social media, you're covering that as the primary. She was the backup. Town capital improvement, Andrew's covering. She was the backup, and then same for grading and reporting. So I think
Yeah.
joint loss and perk are the biggest, and energy. Okie dokie. So that covers that part of the conversation. Any other questions or comments on that? Seeing none, let's move into policy updates. So as the board can see, there is a slew of policies on the agenda tonight that, just by way of brief background, the policy committee has met several times, and particularly met over the summer to start to try to figure out what policies need to be updated, are required to be updated to match model language, are recommended to be updated, are suggested, it's optional. So there's different NHSBA policies that we can adopt the model language for. In addition to that, some of our lettering differs from NHSBA. So we either have combined policies where NHSBA has separate policies. However it works, we don't have all of the policies they have, and they don't have all the policies we have. And so the policy committee, Andrew did a ton of work on trying to reconcile where we need to focus. And so where we've decided to start, for the most part, is with the required updates. We think that makes the most sense for the ones that are required. So on the docket first, we have JBAA, which is the sexual harassment policy. That would be for a second read. As people understand, I hope you remember, this was already gone through legal, and this was
is the
drafted
Title
by
IX
legal.
policy.
Yeah, so
This is the only policy here that's second read this evening.
this is the only second read. So I figure let's get that one out of the way.
I'll make a motion to approve JBAA.
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, 300. All right, and then these next policies are the, required policies. I guess I should say, I don't know that necessarily the model language is required so much as it's required to have a policy on this. But this is the model language, that is recommended by NHSBA. And so, Mike, do you want to take it away in terms of the topics?
Sure. So we had a policy EB. Our EB was about workplace safety, but it also included a student safety program. So if you look at the model policies, they have those as two separate policies. So what we're doing is presenting you tonight with the EB, which is workplace safety and joint loss management. So it contains all the employee stuff. And we're separating off into EBB, the school safety program, which is more about student safety. So basically, the note explains it pretty clearly that it's required, and we're taking our current EB and separating it off. So really adopting both EB and EBB will bring us into compliance.
And this, so my question was, is this kind of cut and paste into two new policies, what we had before, or is this model language from the
This is
NHS?
model language, and so I just opened up EB, and that pretty much is the model language from the model policy.
Okay.
Those are the two things that are required for us to have, and, required from, or they call it priority, from the NHSBA is to make sure that we're compliant with the law. And if you look at the two things that are in here, the workplace safety program and then the joint loss management committee, we have those elements, but like Andrew made the question, which is where can the board view the current workplace safety program? And so,
Still
we-
cannot see your comments, Andrew, I don't know why.
Really? That's weird.
Yeah.
Right, so if I open,
so that was on the category A, the workplace safety program. So
I
we
see
went
that.
looking today
See
because
it.
we're
That's
like,
fine.
where can the board see that? Where can our employees see that? And what we realized is two things, because that specifically references an RSA, and it references a biennial review of those with the Department of Labor. And so I went right to HR, because HR deals with the Department of
Yeah.
Labor, and I said, Holly, where are we with this? And she said, I'm not sure. So we found the document, it's antiquated, it needs to be updated, it needs to be refreshed. And I'm saying that because this is the tip of the iceberg as we start to do this
Yes.
work. So now we have that, now we have found an antiquated program. In terms of the written program, we have to fix that, we have to get that up to date. You know, when we talked about it, we realized if you look at what the law requires you to have, a lot of that is covered by, for example, collective bargaining agreements. We have associations who are going to make sure that we're not violating workplace safety rules. So there are other things that aren't codified that, well, they're codified, but they're not specific to this being a plan. We have to write that plan.
So here's the deal, right? Like, appreciate that, thanks for taking a look at it, right? That same comment is really throughout many of the policies that are in the board, because they reference other procedures or whatever, right? So what I don't want to do, just thinking about the approval of this, right, is I don't want to approve it and then not be compliant with it, right? Because I just heard now that we have an antiquated workplace safety program that needs to be refreshed, right? And what I don't want to do is say, all right, we're maintaining a current workplace safety program if we haven't done that.
So I think this is the question that I need guidance from the board on. There's only so much capacity in our office,
I know.
okay? So if your goal is to go through 285 policies, align them to model policies and do all this, and you're comfortable with waiting on the compliance pieces, okay, we can get the policies taken care of. But this right here just added a tremendous amount of workload to us in the office. And so the question is, do we now proceed ahead with the next required, or do we get the workplace safety program updated? Or are you authorizing us some other way to get that updated? So, for example, I said, ask Primex, who is another key component of this, right? Ask Primex what they have for services. They might have the model workplace safety program, and we just have to, for lack of a better term, fill in the blanks of a model policy or a model program. But either way, there's work to be done, and we're, you know, I call it the tip of the iceberg, or the rabbit hole that we're about to fall into, and we need to be careful of ourselves with it, because this is the first one, and there are others to come behind it.
There are.
And unfortunately, so I'll just give you my acid reflux moment. They all say the superintendent shall.
Yeah, they do.
Okay? And so I look at that and I'm just
They
like,
get busy.
yeah, so you're adopting the policy, and that's fine. And you know, we should have it updated. Don't get me wrong. It should be updated, but we now have the awareness of the fact that it's not, and we need to get after it. It's going to take time. You're going to want to approve it. You're going to want to see it. The version we have was signed by the board chair. Now, is that the right thing to do? I don't know, but the version that we have was signed by a former board chair, so it's old.
Oh, former are we talking about?
Old.
Okay. So I guess the question is, how does the board want to proceed?
Look, I want to be compliant, obviously, with SBA, which has been kind of the guiding principle behind all this, and I think we all
Right.
do, right? I mean, got that. But I don't want to do it in a way that we're now approving a policy that we're not compliant
I agree.
with,
Correct.
right? And that's the predicament. I don't know what the right answer is.
To me, it's to align the policy.
I guess either way, we're not compliant with it.
Well, it's
I
to,
mean,
you have to start somewhere. So you either say to us, okay, now do that work and bring it back and we'll approve it all at once, right? Or you approve this policy and then you say, now you're tasked with getting the workplace safety program finalized, and let us head off and do that. But the initial, the old EB didn't reference this, and so it should, because the law says it should, and we have to get after it.
So we said required. What's you said it was a different word,
They use the word priority,
priority. Okay.
which is required.
Right, and I understand that, and I certainly want to have all the required policies that we have to have, but like Andrew said, I want to make sure that we're compliant. So does it make sense to, in reviewing these policies, if it says something that we're not compliant with, make a list?
Yeah, we need to track this, because otherwise we're not
Right.
gonna remember.
Right.
Right.
So make a list of the things that we have to update,
So.
and we'll get to them someday.
So Kayla, who I brought into the fold with the policy committee, so she has a smart sheet, she's tracking all of this, and so, when I was meeting with Kayla on this, I said, put it on the list.
Right.
Now we have to find our workplace safety program and update it.
Right.
Which I think we're all saying is work that needs to be done, but is it a priority a week into school opening? Is that where we want your time right now?
No, we need your time to be focused on budgets and other things that
Right.
are happening right now.
Budgets.
But I think I agree with you. There's gotta be
Negotiations,
a resource out there, whether it's Primex or some other company that provides this kind of information. I'm sure for a fee.
But again, maybe for this one, but there's a lot of other policies with very similar references that I don't know that's the case. And there's also policies out there that you're going to see tonight with requirements to be presented to the board by a certain date that I know we're not compliant with, right? So there's a lot of other, it's a lot of other aspects to this.
We've opened
So I think-
Pandora's box.
You
I
have
think, in my
open-
mind, I think we're already not compliant with the policies if we don't have a current workplace safety program in this example. So what is the harm of approving the policy as a first step, keeping a running list where we can see it, track it, monitor it, of all the other items as a relation to the policy that we also need to do?
So is this one that has a date on it? That
This is required,
must-
so we need to approve it for sure.
Okay.
Right? But we should have, again, I think the start of a list of all
Right,
the other
I agree.
activities. And I don't know that we can put dates in that, next to that yet until we get through the whole policy cycle, because there's a lot of policies that need
I know.
updating.
Right, so we.
Yep.
There's a lot of
Go
policies that
through
need
and
updating.
approve them or not, and then say, okay, here's the list of what needs to be done, and then we prioritize that list in which order we believe they need to be completed in.
I mean, and we've kind of already, as a policy committee, started that by addressing the required policies, the priority policies first, which are the start of the ones that you're seeing here. I think,
There were
to
six,
your point, Andrew, though, I'm not sure we're not compliant right now yet because we haven't adopted that new policy.
right, well,
So
But
We're
it's-
compliant with our current policy.
unless it's in policy EBB, which we already have, which I don't know, is it referenced in another
So
policy?
our current policy EB does not have this reference in it.
And so we're compliant with our current policy.
So we are, yeah.
But our current policy isn't necessarily aligned with the NHSBA required policy is the issue. So in terms of, I mean, either way, I think we're all acknowledging we're on notice now and this needs to be updated. And so there's no doubt that a workplace safety program will be created and done. The question is, as we continue to dig into these, how many more other tasks are we creating?
Loads.
Lots.
Yeah.
It's literally the tip of the iceberg, and so I guess the point being, what's the priority? To crank through the policies and to build a list of more work to do later to be compliant, or is it to get this compliant? Which means, I mean, I want to say it was a 40-page document that I don't even know that we have it in anything other than a PDF. I don't know where the original document is, so we can retype a 40-page document,
Well,
fix all the pieces in it
yes,
that
but
we need
not
to do.
now.
So I guess my question is, required means we have to have a policy. And I know, recognize that our policies do need to be updated. But is the policy, is it required that we have a policy, or is it required that we have that policy?
So, RSA 281A64
Yes.
says that a public school district shall file biannually with the Department of Labor
Okay.
the updated workplace safety
Both.
program. Okay, that's the law. So that's why you have to have the policy,
Yep,
and we have to do it.
we have to do that. Okay.
If we haven't been asked by the Department of Labor where our biennial update is in the last decades, then I don't know how important that really is, to be honest with you. So nobody in the office knew we had to do that. I get that ignorance of the law is an excuse, but it hasn't been done, but nor have we gotten a notice that we're out of compliance from the Department of Labor. So, should we do it? Absolutely.
I think we have 2 years from the time we
I like this.
approve the policy.
I like the thinking on that, but I think we should do it more quickly than that, to be honest with you. So,
This is crazy.
and I'm not calling out the
Well, I think for
Commissioner of
tonight,
the
I
Department
approve
of Labor
policy,
here.
I'll make a motion to
He doesn't
approve
live in
policy
this
EB for a first reading.
Okay, I'll second it.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the motion?
Motion
To approve it for a first reading.
So would we be approving EB and EBB?
Well, we haven't even looked at EBB yet, so we've
Okay.
only been talking about EB.
All right.
And just, if I
But our
may,
current EB is
Is lame.
EBB.
I mean, I'll
Right.
make a motion to approve all of them for a first
I
reading.
will not second that motion.
Okay. I've already reviewed them all, so.
I know.
But my thought is if we can make a motion to approve, and again, it's up to you, but it's your motion, but EB and EBB, because those two go hand in hand,
Fine.
We have
I'll
to
make a
amend-
motion
as a
to,
first read.
I'll amend my motion to also include EBB for first read.
I'll amend my second.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions? All those in favor of approving EB and EBB as a first read, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, so that passes
Note
4-0.
that there were a number of comments in EBB.
I never saw them.
Well, I mean, and that's a problem we need to solve, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of references to other policies in EBB specifically that maybe not updated, maybe not accurate. So we need to, get that correct too.
Well, and that's why my thought would be, let's table the rest of these policies for now, for tonight, and create the list of work that needs to be done that's being created by EB and EBB as first reads. We've already approved JBAA for its second read. We can bring EB and EBB back for a second read next time, and then move on to a first reading and sort of split these up.
Chunk
Yeah,
away.
because, EBB is gonna be a problem, I think, right? Because it's including the district communication plan for policy EG. We don't have a policy EG, but yet,
But we do have a district communication
we do,
plan.
but it's not policy EG that this is referencing.
Right, so we might need to modify that to not reference EG right now. We might need to modify it to reference, well, maybe we need to approve EG, because that's on this list. Because EBB
Yeah, and
referenced.
further down, there's KFA.
So-
KFA is not a board-approved policy, so.
so going back to the last policy committee meeting, the directive we got was to just adopt the model policy language, which we did.
Yes.
In hindsight, I think we should have then taken that back to the policy committee for this conversation and not necessarily have it at the whole board level, but I could be wrong about that. So that we can do some of the cleanup, because then Kayla and I, in going through it, I said, well, then we need an EG. EG is about a district communication plan, and it's incredibly detailed what that requires. And that's another 40-hour work week to develop. And, it's not that we don't I know how to cancel school. I've never had somebody show up on a snow day saying they didn't know, right? So we know what we're doing, but is there a written plan that details all of that? There is not, and that's what the policy says we're gonna have. So, my point is, again, that'll be another example of a piece that we need to develop down the road to have compliance with it. So we added EG to this list tonight because it was referenced here in EBB. So we needed, so that's why this list grew even beyond the policy committee. And I'm just feeling like I need direction from the board. What stays at the policy committee until it's ready for the full board versus what comes forward?
I think the policy committee needs to, and that's to an extent what I've done for tonight, right, is I've reviewed the policies and tried to reconcile them back as best I'm able to what has been board approved, what still needs updates, what is, and once it's ready, then it comes to the board.
But what determines what's ready?
When
Because
the
this is,
policy's ready, if there's additional work, like we just talked about for workplace safety, that has to be, I think, in my mind, viewed as a separate body of work.
that's not for the policy committee, that's for
That's
the
a-
district,
That's a procedure of sorts, right?
right? I mean, again, going back to why the policy committee was created in the first place, this has only been a year and a half, was Michelle did this as part of agenda prep. Michelle took the model policy, compared it, any changes from NHSBA, and they were brought forward to the board. And so are we, as a policy committee, trying to do that, or are we trying to also take that extra step of align our policies more with NHSBA?
More than just the continuous updates, which is important, right? We have to make sure all the other policies are also compliant.
Everything that's linked to it.
And that's the challenge, right? Where if I've now highlighted in the reporting since June, right, that we have 155 policies that need some type of update, which is a lot. Code changes, word changes, reference changes, linkages to other policies, it's a lot.
And again, that rabbit hole of, Andrew had identified some policies that were required that we didn't have, but we did have them. They just had a different name.
Different
code.
They were coded differently, they were named differently. If you look at this, our policy JLCJA is labeled concussions and head injuries. We actually have 4 policies relative to, there's like sports injuries and non-sports injury, so there's 4 policies that are on our books right now. But they're saying, it really should be the one policy. So it's all cleanup work that we have to do, but boy, it's a tracking experience, and then on top of it, all the work that needs to go into it once we have it, like writing a communication plan, writing a workplace safety plan. And this isn't a whine. We reduced a staff position in our office, right? We said, we had Barbara and Michelle, but we can get by with Kayla. And it's unreasonable to expect Kayla to do all that work, add all this work on it. So I'm just saying to the board, patience has to carry some weight here, because
This is another position. This is another part-time job
it's
or a full-time job.
it's something, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But that's where the opportunity, we literally learned this afternoon about the workplace safety. So the opportunity to go to Primex and say, what do you have for us? I think we're actually gonna be okay on that one, but they might come back and say, we don't have that model, I don't know. It's the same reason the town has Nashua Planning helping the planning board, because they do this, they know how to do this, and they can help sort it. Some of this we're gonna run into, we're gonna have to borrow it from somebody else perhaps.
So I guess what I'm feeling is this isn't ready for prime time yet. Is that where we're at? This needs to go back to policy committee, or?
Okay, well, we approved EB to EBB for first read.
Yes,
right?
agreed.
Do you want to move? I do think the next 3 are pretty critical. EHAA, EHAB, and GBEF, because they're all about data internet security that are also required by law, and they're in replacement of our policy IIAE.
But
They're not.
because we went through this
Yeah.
afternoon, so
So when I read through EHAA, which is computer security, EHAB, data governance and security, and GBEF, internet access for staff, they only apply to staff members. They don't include student use, guest use, of our networks. Anytime anybody brings a device into one of our buildings and hooks up to the Wi-Fi, they're considered a user. What is it?
So you called me.
Yeah.
And said, this doesn't, how can
It
we
doesn't
replace
line
II? And that's when I realized that JICL is the internet access for students. JICL. And that's not on here.
That's the model policy. So the NHSBA has JICL.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you said we have, and I couldn't find it, I'm like, where is it? I'm like, oh, it must be on the model, and that's
It
where I
is,
found
that's
it.
what I'm saying.
Okay.
So when we're trying to replace, because it says here with the adoption of
Yeah, School
EHAA,
district internet access for students.
Right.
yeah, and GBEF, that also needs to include JICL.
Right, and JICL
Right.
is required, that's right.
So this is.
So
this
they
is
seem
my-
to be grouped together.
This is my gut, is that a previous Litchfield board made the decision, instead of having 4 policies,
Yes, we did. I was on the board.
Two that deal with employees, right? And one that deals with students, J. You put it all under I and saying whether you're an employee or a kid, it's about instruction. So you put it into that category. And that's why we have the one, IIAC, AE, I mean. And if we're gonna separate it back off into the four, which is fine, we can do that. Again, it's the caretaking to make sure that we don't lose track of this. But really, JICL is almost the same as, I can't remember which one of the E's or G.
Yeah. So this, is that?
Just that it references students versus staff.
Right, right. So, I mean, Andrew raised the question, do we then need to send out the new policy with the new form for parents to sign off on them when we just had everybody do that for the beginning of the school year? So not seeing JICL, I said, my opinion was that we can't rescind IIAE or whatever it was.
Yep.
Because that's for student and other users.
I agree, it needs to be complete.
Right,
Right, we need to have it complete before we do anything.
right,
I appreciate that.
yeah.
It just needs to be, it feels like these are grouped, right? So if we're looking at these policies right now, EB, EBB, and EG, and ECA all seem to kind of follow under the same workplace safety, school safety, district communication plan, security conversation, right? Those all kind of seem tied together.
I don't know, because EHAA, EHAB, GBEF, and
JICL.
JICL are all dealing with technology.
That's what I'm saying, but I'm saying EB, EBB, EG,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah, the other
ECA
ones.
are
Sure.
grouped over here
Yeah.
under this issue.
And then there's the technology
And they
things.
reference each
Yeah.
other, and then those ones, the technology and the internet, reference each other.
Yep.
Again, I'm coming up with, I'm not sure these are ready for prime time right now. I think we need to have a thorough list of every policy that's impacted by every, and make sure they're up, but then again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now I'm overwhelmed. We've done EB and we've done EBB. The other one reference was EG, is that correct?
The district communication.
And EBB?
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
So I think we should, I'd like to make a motion to approve EG for a first reading because it goes hand in hand with the EBB. And so then we've approved those three that are together as a group
Okay, for first reading. What about
for
the
a first
security
reading.
one? You wanted buildings and ground security, or?
I don't see that one.
EBB has many of the ones that follow.
Yeah.
Going into EBB, there
There's a-
are a lot of references.
There's a lot of other references that we don't tick and tie. So we approved it for a first reading, I don't know that we can approve it for a second reading
Right.
without sending it back to the policy committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and same thing with EG, right? This is, again, back to that district,
Yeah, all of these, right?
the actual communications plan and,
ECA.
and protocols that is reviewed no less than every 2 years. Like, I don't know that we're compliant with that right now.
I'm sorry, which one's that, Andrew?
EG.
Right. We're not,
We're not.
but
Yeah.
we've never had EG. So
Right.
you're now approving EG, and I like Peter's theory, give us 2 years to get it developed.
What a mess.
Yeah.
But we're not. I mean,
The district's not a mess, but the policy stuff is
Yes.
kind of messy right
I
now.
think it's because we're going from our in-house policies
correct.
to this is how they do it, and it doesn't line up.
No, it doesn't.
But is that the answer? Is the answer to being compliant with all of the RSAs necessarily doing what they do?
That is the easiest way to do it,
Is
because
it?
they,
Safe harbor
they
too,
do
if
the
there's
work
an issue.
for you,
Once we-
and you're
once we do
adopting
the
the
update,
model
you're-
language,
yeah.
and then going forward, anytime they update a policy, we update like, that's.
And it's much easier to track.
And
It's
that-
just hard
right,
now.
Right.
Right.
It's- Yeah.
So I think,
This is years
yes,
of
it's
work.
the way to do it, but it is an awful lot of work
Mm-hmm.
to get there, and the timing of it matters, right?
Well, and I think too, there are, being a local school district, we have local control, we have local policies that are the right fit for our town. You know, you lose a lot of that by just going by, this is what the state of New Hampshire School Board Association says we should do.
The one piece is that,
Or you gain from it, depending upon.
Well,
if
Do you?
there's an RSA that
Mm-hmm.
we're not aware of, that the model policy calls out for us, that's the right thing
Yeah,
to do. Like, we
absolutely.
should have a workplace safety.
Yeah.
Now, so what I do, I Googled the law, I read the law, I read the law to Holly. She said, what? I'm like, I know. I mean, it was that kind of conversation that, it was like this aha moment.
right,
And now we have work to do,
Mhm.
but again, it's the right work to do.
Right.
But don't expect it yesterday.
and
That's
how
all.
much, how much can we take on at a time?
Yes.
Which is why I'm trying to chunk it, I guess, and
But-
do a group.
Maybe if it doesn't have an RSA attached to it, we can leave those for the end. That's the only place we're gonna be able to have sort of real local control, is if it doesn't have an RSA attached to it.
I don't even know how we go through and say what does and what doesn't, though.
Yeah.
And there's
You'd
just
ha- without
there's
individually
just so
reading
many.
each policy and their pages.
Find.
It's a good idea, it's just,
RSA.
there's so many of them.
So now we know what we're up against.
But I just think it's important we recognize, I mean, if somebody calls us out on an RSA that we're not following, we fix that. I mean, again, nobody's coming in here each day saying we're aware of a law that we're choosing not to follow. That's not, so saying we're a mess from that point, that's not accurate. I mean, we are, we strive to be in compliance with all of that. Is it as buttoned up and fine-tuned? Nope. Nope, we're seeing that.
Yep, there's work to be done.
So for tonight's purposes, we have done our second read and approval of the sexual harassment policy, so that's all set. We have done a first read of EB and EBB. Are there any other policies on this list that we want to do a first read of tonight? Or do we want to send the rest back to the policy committee to determine what needs to be approved next and as associated with EB and EBB, which has been our first read?
I mean, I was cool with the unmanned aircraft
Oh, God, no.
systems.
That was the worst policy I've ever read.
Policy on drones, people.
Policy on drones. Get the superintendent's permission. Done. Done. We don't have the manpower to be checking FAA registrations and licenses.
How's that one?
How high the drone is going to go and,
But
yeah,
5 pounds or less.
400 feet.
That too.
Yeah.
But we did that. I mean, this
I know.
is the point when we shot the drone video at GMS of the
Yes.
traffic.
But the superintendent authorized it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep,
I'm saying the
I asked it to be done, and the
Yeah.
person, and the other thing is, because we're under the flight paths to
Right.
Manchester Airport, the person had to know all those laws and regulations. They had to be licensed to do it.
Do
So
we have
we
to
didn't
say
just
them all in
hire
our
Joe
policy?
Schmo with a drone to do it. We got
Yeah.
somebody who could, so my authorization is they know what they're doing.
Right.
They're not gonna crash a plane.
But do we need a 4-page policy outlining?
This
all
is
the
an optional
requirements?
policy.
Yeah.
I think the challenge with this optional policy, per Kayla, because I asked that question, I said, this is an optional policy. Like, this is probably one that we may not need, but she was saying that it goes along with another policy that is required.
It's EBB.
Yeah,
So-
it's
Oh,
EBB.
it is?
Okay.
Yeah.
The work, or the safety program, because
Yeah.
it would not be safe to fly a drone into a
Student,
flight path.
So it's optional, but it's referenced in E
So-
EBB.
So because it was referenced there, she said, I
Where
need
does
to,
common sense take over?
I need to do this one too.
so you want it
But
to
you
be
know
a
what?
policy.
So just think about it for a second, though. Somebody gets a new drone, a good drone, not like a toy drone. They get a real drone, and they say, my God, there's a beautiful field at GMS. I'm gonna go practice playing it. I can sit up here on top of the Litchfield and see everything, and I can practice. Unauthorized, we don't know that it's happening, and it causes an FAA thing. Why do we need to have a policy? Because we didn't know about it. We had a policy, we protected. That's why we're doing this.
Oh, I get it.
know
I
it's
get
like,
it. I just
I actually
think-
don't see ECD referenced in EBB.
oh, it's gotta be. Why would she have done it?
I just did a search on ECD and
I just
EBB and
think
it's
it
not
can
there.
be a much simpler policy. I think when you get into, you know, the nitty gritty about how much it weighs and what it can be used for and, we could just say use of drones is prohibited unless you have written, express written authorization by the superintendent.
My head is spinning. So
Yeah.
can we agree at this point that what we're going to do is we have approved EB and EBB as a first read. The next step is to go back to the policy committee for us to figure out what other policies need to be addressed upon the second read and approval of those policies and bring those forward next time for a first read.
So I have a question first. Was JICI, weapons on school property, meant to be included in this agenda, or was it supposed to be JICL?
No, well, so JICI is also a required policy
Yeah,
that we needed an update on,
okay.
right? And this was one of the few that were required, which is why we're seeing it here tonight, in
Right.
addition to JICL.
Okay.
Yep,
Did our old policy not?
And
We had an old policy for JFCJ that covered this. So this is like, now the code is off as well as
the verbiage.
the verbiage with the policy.
Okay.
So again, it's not that we didn't have a policy about
Right.
weapons.
have a weapons policy.
We're now bringing it in compliance with.
Okay.
So, Andrew, I'm thrown off on the unmanned drones, ECD, because I thought it was in this, and you're right, it's not in
not.
this. It's somewhere. We did not just.
Linked-
We
I'm
didn't
sure,
come up with
it's just
another
I don't know
optional
what
one,
it
but I
is.
don't know where
Yeah.
it came from.
I mean, if it's an optional policy and it's not referenced, then we shouldn't be talking about it at this point, right? Let's
Correct.
Is it in
Yeah.
That's a
ECA,
bit of
buildings
a-
and ground security? Maybe
Maybe it's in there.
that's the one.
It's in one of these others that was required.
I would assume
Amended.
building and ground security, I think, relates to drones, right?
ECD is not in that policy either.
God damn it. All right, I'm not gonna guess anymore. Okay, so going back to my suggestion, again, are we good with EB and EBB being the only ones that we do a first read on for tonight? And then we take the rest of these and figure out what the next steps are? Or do we want to go through each of these and do a first
I
read?
think that's fine. Let's bring it back to the policy committee and let's get grounded on this again.
Thank you.
And go from there.
Okay.
But
Was that
that
a
being
motion?
said,
Haha, grounded.
that, right?
I saw what you did there.
I do have a concern about the policy IIAE that was signed by
Yeah.
parents, because what was referenced on that policy was an out-of-date policy with an out-of-date date referenced on that policy. And at least from what I saw in the middle school, the policy, the form that came home that was being asked for parents to sign, one side said applicants. Well, that applicant's not a student. The other side of the form was students. So we're signing, I believe, what was district staff compliance, as well as the other side, which was student compliance.
So, help me out with this. Was it a physical piece of paper that came home?
Yes.
In a
Yes.
backpack?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was not a.
It was
um,
also emailed. I also received it in an email.
Okay.
Is that one of the ones that's in Power School that I
Well,
can go
that's
in
what I'm
and
trying to-
fill in? Okay.
So when you say email, do you mean Power School? It was,
No, it was emailed.
8th grader, 5th grader, physical copy came home
And a physical copy came home, and they were not allowed to get their Chromebooks
until it was
until the
signed.
policy was
And that
signed.
was not clear at all in that form, that was a requirement to get your Chromebook.
Okay.
And this is IIAE?
IIAE, which is our current digital technology use policy,
Okay.
something like that.
So this is the policy. I have it right here.
So we've now had parents sign forms for a policy that was referencing something that's not correct.
so let me go back and have the conversation with Chris, because and I guess Jen. So the operational side of that resides between tech and the school. But let me find out exactly what got sent home. But that is the current policy. And
It
the current,
is.
the current policy
I took a
did
first
lump
look.
together staff and students. It was one coverall policy that had everybody in it.
So as a parent of a high school student, I did not receive a paper copy. But I'm looking now on Power School to see if it's
we
one.
did. Did you do it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
did it.
so. Permissions and agreements, is that included in there?
Could be an agreement, could be a contract, I don't know.
Oh, that's the handbook. A bunch of stuff. Internet use agreement. LMS students will be given a paper copy. So I did not receive it, but I could click on it and see policy, I believe it's policy, yeah, IIAE.
So that was a Power School.
That's in Power School. If you go to forms, You have to be on a laptop or a PC.
I might not be able to see it because I don't have a student.
Well,
Yeah,
I think the challenge I have is now I'm hearing there's discrepancy between the buildings, right? And like, I would
think
assume
it's
GMS
because-
students have Chromebooks, or
I
should
think
they be
it's-
signing these too? Like,
well, I think it's because when these policies, when the technology, when we went one-to-one, this is when all of the internet use policies came out. And so we had to review the
sure.
the district-wide policies for everybody. So those were all done at the same time. I think LMS is separated out because at the time we didn't have Chromebooks or internet access available for GMS students. So it was
Yeah.
just the high school and LMS. Because when we rolled out the high school first, then we went down to 5th grade. So,
But I mean, I would, now that it's one-to-one with GMS,
Right,
I would
every
expect
student should
GMS
be-
students
right,
get forms
absolutely.
too,
So I,
right.
right?
so I have that question, and then,
So I got the form home for
Yeah.
my LMS student. I read the applicant to mean anyone that wants to have
Access.
a Chromebook or access. So applicant for Chromebook or applicant for internet access. I didn't read it as an employee.
And I read the other side as parent, guardian, and student, because that's what it says.
Yeah.
The other side says applicant, which is, it's reading as district website action, or sections, updates to just, what?
Right, but it was
what are
two.
students
So there's
updating
the
on district
acceptable
website
use
sections?
policy, and then there's the resources policy. So
See, I did-
the front page is the media acceptable use policy, the web acceptable use policy, and then the back of it was the,
Then it shouldn't be called applicant. You're not applying to
I
anything.
agree, it's not clear, but that's how
Stretched it for me.
What are we applying to?
but
So-
what, so.
It's the form, I think it's the form.
Again, I'm trying to figure out the policy versus the
Right.
form, what's sent home.
Right.
And I just
I
want to
mean,
make
it
sure that.
literally says policy code IIAE on the top.
But
is
that's
it?
not in the
But
policy.
is it the policy or I don't even know who owns that form, I guess is the point. I need to trace that back.
Right.
And it also says approval of
December 14th,
which is not correct,
2016.
because the updated policy for IIA was approved on March 4th,
2020, right. So when I log in on, for my high schooler, I didn't get a paper copy again, so I have a link to the digital technology, electronic media acceptable use policy, and then it says, I understand these rules and have reviewed them with my child. Both my child and I understand, and I give permission for my child to access the internet at school. That's all it says in Power School. There's nothing about an applicant or,
So I think for tonight, right?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with IIA in the form that was sent, I think. Let's investigate.
But again, to be clear, IIAE is the current policy.
Yeah.
That's what we
It
want people
is.
to agree to now.
Right.
If we adopt a new policy, we'll redo that, because
Right.
there'll be a new policy.
Agree, but I think the form, again, that the parents have signed is not correct.
So we need to
Or
see if
IA.
they match.
And I'm feeling like one school has an older form, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Let me do some more digging on that.
and
Okay.
having seen the form, I can't weigh in on that.
So for tonight, at almost 9 o'clock, we are going to go ahead and table the rest of these policy conversations. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
Okay.
Is the Litchfield School District Data Security and
That
Privacy?
was my next
is
question.
That's not a policy.
And correct, that
That's a
is
plan.
a governance manual. And just before we do that, I want to just verify the next policy committee is Tuesday, the 12th at 3:30. Right?
Correct. That's
Okay,
what's on
so
my work
we-
calendar.
We have that down. And I've included Kayla at this point. And then is there anybody else, a director or, is there
I think
anybody else who would
Chris.
be helpful? I think Chris for this.
Chris and Holly maybe for the workplace policy
Got it.
stuff. If they are able to attend.
I already added Chris, I'm now gonna add Holly. So let me do that, so that we have it. Thank you.
Yep.
I hate to open up another Pandora's box, but,
So don't.
well, I feel like I have to. I mean, I understand that policy is the board's purview with help from the superintendent. But we have in the past been victims of, we make a decision and then we implement it immediately, and then everybody freaks out the next day at school. So is there a way that we can include staff members, admins on this committee? Like, should they have input into the policies, and because they're the ones implementing them on a daily basis?
I think if they're linked to an RSA, it doesn't, nobody has any input.
No,
because of
yeah.
that.
I signed Mr. Solzen up for the drones.
No drones.
It's pretty cool.
I'm just putting it out there as a philosophical,
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree. Anyone who's interested in policy and wants to do the work, come on in. I mean, I would never say no.
Brutal.
I think what's hard about it is,
separating what's in use already with what it should be.
yes. And that's, I mean, again, just because it's the way we've done it doesn't mean it's the way we have to do it. But in the past, this was all done by one person and presented to the board, and there wasn't a committee, there
Right.
wasn't input, there wasn't,
Yeah.
they brought the policy forward. You did a first read. If anyone had an issue with it, you heard from the public about that policy. I think very rarely have we ever gotten any feedback on policy stuff, once in a while maybe,
Yeah.
but dress code. But otherwise, very rarely. And then we do a second read and it passes. So I would never say no to more people
Okay.
being involved, but I don't know how to even accomplish that or who to invite for that.
Right.
Going
I think
forward.
the piece that we had put going forward was to involve principals and directors as needed. And I think to your point, everything gets read twice in public.
Yeah.
The agenda, I mean, we're more transparent than we've ever have been.
Right.
The links were there for the public to view. And I think we just have to trust that if somebody really sees, well, wait a second, have you thought about this? They're gonna give us that feedback.
Okay.
And then we just need to make sure we communicate out once it's adopted.
Sure.
That being said, if there's anyone in the public or any
Oh, yeah.
staff member who is passionate about policy, we would love to have you on the policy committee.
Is this
Yes.
on, policy committee meetings are on the schedule, if you go to the
Yep.
website, if you click on school board, it's under committees, and then
I'll
there's a.
double check
Okay.
that to make sure.
Just so that everybody knows when when.
Second and
See-
fourth
see
Tuesday, I
it.
think, is where we
Yeah.
are, right?
Yes.
Second and fourth Tuesday at 3:30.
All right. Sorry to belabor the fact.
No, you're good. So do we need to do anything with the Litchfield School District Data Security
So-
Governance Manual?
That governance manual does require an annual approval. Don't ask me if that's by policy or by law, not sure, but at any rate, that is the public-facing policy, so that, or public-facing manual that
Yeah.
sort of explains in non-specific terms what we do relative to, privacy related to data security.
You
You can see my comments on this one?
It's weird.
Weird, okay.
Yeah,
I had a number of questions on this one.
Anyway,
So,
I don't see the policy committee on that schedule.
I'm guessing you're looking for a motion on approving this for this year?
I will not be supportive of that because there's a number of open questions. And plus, it's,
so
It's
let's,
all links.
let's have a discussion about it, so we,
40 pages.
so this is, just, again, for board awareness, this has been approved by the board in the past. I can't tell you the last time it was approved.
Yeah, I didn't see that on.
I'm fairly certain that when we brought this forward, the first draft may have still had Jason's name on it.
Yeah.
So it was important that Chris review this and put his mark on it, and to make sure it reflected what his understanding is of our system. So let's go through.
So it sounds like these are Chris questions, for the most part. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, there's this particular, I don't want to call it a policy. What should I call it?
Manual.
Okay, manual, thank you, it's up top. This particular manual is more specific than the policies. As an example, on page
guess it's 5, there's call out to mobile devices, but I don't see mobile devices in any of our policies. So what are we doing in this manual that's different than the policy for mobile devices? Right?
So when somebody brings a mobile device to our building and accesses our network, we are recording that that device has access to our network.
So you have control over the network, which I agree with.
Right.
Right, but do you then have control of the device connected to the network? So if you want to look at the device, because it's connected to your network, can you do that?
We look at the device.
Can you take a device,
i.e. my phone is connected to the district.
you
I'm
think,
there.
you have suspicion that there's something Mrs. Ames is looking at that's inappropriate.
You know
can
me.
Take her phone and look at it.
That's not what this says, though.
Yeah, I was just gonna
This
say.
says the data stored and/or processed by an electronic device. We just know if you come in and do something nefarious with it, that it's captured, that's recorded, like that device has been on our network. That's not saying that we can seize the device. And you're agreeing to that when you, because you get that splash screen that you have to agree to, which nobody reads.
I tried connecting to that at CHS and I couldn't.
But I've been a victim of not reading that big, long thing, and I'm basically saying, yep, and the firstborn child, yep. So, how is the district controlling data stored? I don't think we're controlling data stored.
I think that it's just that this policy covers all of these different types of communication and information and data.
This manual.
Manual, sorry, yes, not a policy. Yeah,
I think it's worth Mr. Jamrod coming in and just presenting this to the board,
Yeah, we can do that.
right? And just taking us through it with his stamp on it, what it means, what are the key highlights, maybe in like a 10-minute overview. I think that would be helpful. I mean, there's a lot here, right? And, you know, there are links to an online software list. I was looking at this online software list, and I don't know that it's accurate.
It's not accurate.
Okay, well,
It needs to be updated. So scrolling down further, you said, is the list up to date? You saw My School Bucks, which has been actually replaced by the K-12 Payment Center. You're absolutely right. So I asked the question today, because I saw the comment today, and I said, where are we with this? And the answer is that Karen Desjardins is updating that list. So she's going through, because it's not just updating the list, it's updating that we have all the, all the policy, sorry,
the licenses.
all the privacy
Yeah.
stuff that goes with that. So, so that's an ongoing task to be.
I get that, and
kept up
that to
date.
me is less critical. Yes, it's called out here, right? But, you know, it's the things like disaster response and recovery plan. That's pretty critical to have.
Yep.
Do we have that?
So,
You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm just asking as a question, you know, I'm not expecting that we do, or I
We
hope
do.
we do,
We
but great,
do, but
okay.
I
we do.
think those are Chris questions.
Agree.
Does the district get have to get security requirements, like in my business, we have to be PCI DSS certified and all these other acronyms? And that's what a lot of this stuff looks like to me, is stuff that we do for PII, PHI, you know, financial information to comply with GLBA and some other stuff. So that's what this document looks like, at least in part to me.
this to me is more about protecting kids from accessing inappropriate, you know, so we have filters that are in place, right? So as a public school, we filter what people can access, and that's what we need to do to protect kids from that. Kids aren't putting you know, they're not putting the social security number into devices that we have, and so it's a different level, I think, than what you're talking about with that level of security. You know, I can remember when my first job as an administrator, I pulled up a kid in Power School and their social security number was listed on the page. And I said, why is that accessible to every staff member in the school? So we changed that. We were able to delete that field and not have that be available, and I'm not even sure that we should be collecting it on the back end unless there's a reason to have that. The point being, that's what we're protecting against, is to make sure that what's in there is only accessible to people who need access to it, and then making sure that, it's secure and people are safe when they're on there.
Okay.
Go Guardian, if somebody types in a question, that there's all sorts of triggers that happen. If a student were to type a query in, it's immediately alerted to our IT staff and to our administrators so that we can do a follow-up with the student if it's something of self-harm, for example. So there are measures there, yes. I feel like I'm talking in circles. Sorry.
So I think
we're
we're
all
landing on Chris coming in to,
I think so, right? I mean, I think that makes sense, and just give him an opportunity just to provide the board with a summary. This is a document that does need board approval, so let's,
He's a director that we don't see on a regular basis.
okay.
and I do think there's a lot in here that's pretty critical, so.
I will invite Chris to, I'll invite him to the meeting on the 20th, and
Sounds good. School board comments.
I had one comment. I happened to be flipping through the TV this past weekend, and what came up was YouTube, right? And on YouTube, it brought up a newer, I don't know the date, but it brought up a video of Mr. John Latcha, sorry, thank
It's
you,
okay.
doing his video that he puts out to the town. And in that video, and I'm not sure the board has seen it or is aware of it, but there's direct references to the school with the superintendent directly referenced, including video clips of the superintendent speaking, that I think are inaccurate, right? And so what I would like to do is I would like to at least ask John to invite a board member to come speak about what's happening at the elementary. It's all about the elementary school and renovations at the middle school and things like that, and what he thinks are inaccuracies. So I don't think he's reached out to any board member. I don't think he's reached out to the superintendent or the business administrator or anybody in the district. And I'd like to be able to clear up some of those misconceptions that were publicly said and now broadcasted on replay on TV and on YouTube, right? And I would also like to encourage those that do have questions, including Mr. Lasha, thank you, that there is a public-facing website with all of the information out there for GMS, and it's reimaginingGMS.com, and it's on our district website at the very bottom of the website. You can find all information, including there was references to how we're not properly completing civil engineering and all this stuff. And I do think that there's a lot of information out there on the website, and I want to point the public to that in the event that there are questions, because I think that video was inaccurate.
I think there is a lot of circulating misinformation in our community.
I would encourage the board to watch that, because
I'm
it took me a moment, because I
Yeah.
happened to turn it on, and it happened to be right on the school, and I sat down and watched it. I'm like, oh my God.
how old is that video?
I think it's very recent.
Okay.
I think it's very recent.
Yeah, it's disheartening because, we need to do a better job of putting the truthful information out there. But I think a lot of assumptions are being made without people partaking in the process.
I'm all for freedom of speech and all that, right? But to publicly say some of the things that were shared without any contact or awareness, or at least having the board have the opportunity to respond to,
Yeah.
I think we should correct. So,
Thank you for bringing that up. I will go watch it.
I'll watch it too.
that's it.
Yeah, just along that line, John's reached out in the past, I've been on his show, and I've found him to be very open and accommodating and willing to listen. He puts a lot of work into his craft and his shows. I can tell you he does his homework, so I'm going to watch that because I'm really curious to see. And then I think there's another policy question perhaps by the town or by Litchfield TV in terms of the accuracy of the information that does get shown on there. First I've heard this raised as a question with John's show, but you know, there have been questions
Legislative
before about
updates.
legislative updates and some of the information there and whether it's the full story or not. So I think there is a bigger question, just because you're right, it's there in front of you. You tune it in and you're right on top of it, right? So it's
I think it's an example of sharing information that you believe is true and that you want people to believe is true. When the reality is those who are closest to it know that it's not, in some cases. So, anyway.
Thank you for tuning in and sharing.
Any other school board comments for tonight? Hearing.
Are these the manifests? I haven't
These
seen
are
them
the
yet.
manifests, yeah.
Thank you for your responses to the
You're welcome.
questions.
We've done community input, but have you signed? It's just me.
There's only one signature on this one.
But these were all emailed to us in advance.
They were, yep.
From what I saw, from what I signed.
It's gonna fall out.
We need a crate instead of folders.
Oh, those folders get reused a lot. Are there any other questions on the manifest from what people reviewed online?
No, I mean, I think the only follow-up question I would have, right, is if there are staff members using personal credit cards because they exceed a limit, right, is there a better way to do that so they don't have to use their personal credit cards?
The better way to do it is to increase the limit.
Increase limit.
The problem was that, am I correct, that was the bags?
Yeah.
Yep.
And we needed the bags. So it
Yeah.
was like, by the time you go through and do all that, it was just, all right, you're at the place, get the bags, and get them back here so we can get the bags stuffed and distributed, so. But you're right, it should be, she needs the limit to do the job she has, so.
Doug, I had kind of a similar question, I guess. You know, I did that one already. As far as submitting receipts for reimbursement, like my husband and I have done some work with the high school theater department, and so we had some out-of-pocket expenses that we then submitted receipts for to be reimbursed out of the Student Activities Fund. I know that there was a mention in the audit, the auditors, when they came to present to us, they mentioned handling that in a different way, so that, basically, so that we don't have volunteers fronting potentially hundreds or thousands of dollars waiting for that reimbursement, like something like a pre-authorized account or something like that. Is there, we've looked into changing how we do that?
I mean, really, the only way would be for you to almost shop for it
Yeah,
and then give an itemized receipt for it and then us to write the check.
right. And
Which
ideally,
in
we
the-
would do that.
Ideally, we would do that.
Yeah.
Timeliness of that can
Right.
be a problem. I think the auditors will say that, but I think the auditors will also say they find the same thing in every school district
Okay.
that they go to.
Okay. Yeah,
That
an example
unfortunate,
might-
and fortunately, I mean, it goes both ways.
Yeah,
Because you don't have schools and you don't have all that goes with schools, which be the clubs and curricular and sports, without community involvement. And sometimes that's community fronting the money
yeah.
in order for things to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Can you
I
share
think
your
it's more of
Amazon
that.
wish list?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's lumber.
But as a community member, I wouldn't want anyone to front money unless they're comfortable. But I also wouldn't want them fronting money unless they talked with the right people to know
Right.
that
It's gonna be
it's going to be reimbursed.
Yeah,
As well,
exactly.
because we're not going to reimburse for everything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, an example that we had was we were coating the flats for the last performance with wood glue, and we ran out of wood glue, so he had to run to Home Depot and
Yeah.
pick up some wood glue. So, you know, there's some give and take, but
Doug, can we issue a temporary P card? So in other words, could there be a theater P card that's controlled by somebody? So at least it's,
an employee.
Yeah.
no, to a parent volunteer even.
To a parent
I'm asking,
volunteer.
you know,
I mean, I
is
think
it,
it's
is it possible that somebody has that? So it's still tied back to, it's a specific card, it's assigned to a specific person, and receipts have to cross-reference it, but
Yeah, we can create we have a limit that we can go to, and we're always well below
Yeah.
the limit. But each person has their own limit as well. It is a card with their name on it, so we'd have to know in advance
Right.
who that person was. But
Right.
theater might be a good example, just because there are both known expenses and then
And
some
unknown.
last minute expenses
Yeah.
as well, where we could issue it to that, and we have complete control over the limit, where I can go in right now and I can decrease someone's limit to zero within a second. So, I mean, we do have,
So
Ann
you
and I
could
have.
make it as tight as this is how much money you have to spend.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, Ann and I both have that control, so, yeah, we could,
I mean,
Not that I'm looking
just-
for a district P card. It's not.
Well,
It's
it
not
it
what I'm
change,
looking
it
for.
changes it from a reimbursement to a person
Yeah.
to a payment of a card, you know,
And it
so it
actually
is.
saves you time.
And it just, yeah, and there's that control piece. So that might be a possible thing that, now, there's extra hassle that goes with that, right? Somebody's got to sign off, accept it, you know, they lose it, whatever, there's all
Right,
that
right.
stuff, but
Yep.
it-
I'm just
it's
thinking
worth
for
considering.
situations where we have community members and volunteers, you know, kind of helping out the schools,
Yep.
doing that. It can be, not, not that I'm complaining about having done it, but, you know, it could be a deterrent for, so people who want to help out, but
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so I think especially for the ones that have the multiple purchases, you know, I'll talk with Ann about that too,
Yeah.
and we can bring it up with the administration.
Okay.
Because it's not gonna work for everybody,
Yeah.
or for every program, because sometimes it's just a one-off type of thing.
yeah.
But theater could make a lot of sense, so.
All right. I'm just curious. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will move into a non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A:3 for the A, dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him unless the employee affected, 1, has a right to a meeting, and 2, requests that that meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted. B, the hiring of any person as a public employee. C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely adversely affect the reputation of any person other than a member of the body or agency itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. And then D through L, C citation. For transparency purposes, we will be going into non-public tonight under B and C, I believe. There is no A conversation. So, with that, is there a motion to go into non-public?
So made.
And I'll second. All those in favor of going into non-public, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstain. I'd like to thank everyone for sticking with us tonight. I know some of our conversations involved an awful lot of letters and seemed very circular. As you can see, we're struggling through it, and you know, we're doing the best we can. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 20th. If you have any interest at all in being a school board member, the Google form will be live at some point tomorrow and will be posted on the district page, as well as,
The
I'll
Facebook
get that
page.
to you, the Facebook pages, as well as town Facebook pages.
Or a policy committee member,
Or Paul.
if you have any interest in being
Oh,
not only a board
correct.
member.
Yes, and if you love policy and want to help us understand letters the way that we have been saying them all tonight, please come join us. So thank you again, and have a good night.